Namaskar and very good morning. Today we have the august presence of Dr. Rajkumar Ranjan Singh, Honorable Minister of State for Education and External Affairs. Very good morning, sir. We have Dr. K. VijayRaghavan, Principal Scientific Advisor. We have Shri Amit Khare ji, Secretary, Higher Education. We have Professor D.P. Singh ji, Chairman UGC. We have Professor Anil Sahasbuddhe, Chairman AICTE. Shri Rakesh Ranjan ji, Additional Secretary TE, and Dr. Abhay Jere, along with other luminaries and dignitaries across the country with us. I would now like to invite Shri Rakesh Ranjan ji, Additional Secretary TE, to the welcome address, sir.
Honorable Minister of State for Education and External Affairs, Dr. R.K. Ranjan Singh ji, respected Secretary Shri Amit Khare, Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, Sir Dr. K. VijayRaghavan ji, Chairman UGC, Professor D.P. Singh ji, Chairman AICTE, Professor Anil Sahasbuddhe ji, and dignitaries who have joined this inaugural session, a very warm welcome to all of you. It's a pleasure for me, sir, to welcome you today. Despite the Parliament session and your busy schedule, you have been able to come for this webinar and this inaugural session. Sir, very, very welcome to you. No webinar on this topic of research, innovation and ranking would have been complete without the presence of Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India. Sir, Dr. VijayRaghavan, sir, a very warm welcome to you for this webinar. I also take pleasure in welcoming our Secretary Higher Education, Mr. Amit Khare, Professor D.P. Singh, Chairman UGC, and Professor Anil Sahasbuddhe, Chairman AICTE. Sir, we have a very distinguished panel, and this entire program is organized in the form of 3 panel discussions, and we have very distinguished panelists and moderator for each of the panel discussions. I would like to give a brief intro of the program and the structure, the way we are going to conduct it. The first panel is on the topic of ensuring excellence and relevance in research. And we have very distinguished panelists, Dr. K. Radhakrishnan, he is former Secretary of Space and Chairman of the Standing Committee of IIT Council. Sir, very, very warm welcome to you for this inaugural session and for the consequent panel discussion. Other panelists on this topic of research are Professor Govindan Rangarajan, Director IISc Bangalore. Sir, you will be happy to know that IISc Bangalore scored a perfect 100 this time on the research parameter of the KEVS ranking. Professor Bhaskar Ramamurthy, Director IIT Madras, he is the third panelist. And the discussion, the entire discussion will be conducted by Professor Rajat Muna. He is presently Director of IIT Bhilai, has also been a former DG of CDAC, and is a professor from IIT Kanpur. So a very strong background in research. Our second panel is on building innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem. We have 3 panelists here also. Mr. Deepak Bagla, he is MD and CEO of Invest India. It's a Government of India organization. We have Dr. Anita Gupta, Scientist G from DST. She is looking after the entrepreneurship development and innovation in the DST. We have Mr. Yash Bharadwaj. He is co-founder and CEO, a very young entrepreneur of just about 22-23 years. And at such a young age, he has been able to create a mark for himself. He has a number of patents and has been co-founder and founder of a number of companies at the young age of 22-23. So a very warm welcome to all 3 panelists. And Dr. Abhay Jere, he is here with us. He is the Chief Innovation Officer of the Innovation Cell of the Ministry of Education. Very warm welcome, Abhay.
Thank you.
The third panel is on the strategy for HEIs for excelling in global rankings. On the panel are Professor V. Ram Gopal Rao, Director IIT Delhi. Second panelist is Mr. Ashwin Fernandez, Regional Director of KEVS. The third panelist is Professor C. Rajkumar. He is VC of the OP Jindal University. And the discussion will be conducted by Professor K.K. Agrawal. He is the Chairman of the National Board of Accreditation. NBA as of now is implementing our national ranking framework. So Chairman NBA, he is conducting this panel discussion. So very warm welcome to all the panelists and the moderator, Professor Agrawal. With this, sir, I end my vote of thanks and we will start the program.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would like to invite Professor D.P. Singh, Chairman UGC, to address the August gathering, sir.
Namaste. Honorable Minister of State for Education and External Affairs, Dr. Rajkumar Ranjan Singh ji, Honorable Secretary Higher Education, Shri Amit Khare ji, Honorable Principal Scientific Advisor, Dr. K. VijayRaghavan ji, Honorable Chairman AICT, Professor Anil Sasbudde ji, respected Dr. K. Radhakrishnan ji, Shri Rakesh Ranjan ji, Dr. Abhijay, distinguished panelists and moderators, all the Vice Chancellors, Directors, Principals, friends from academia, researchers and students. I am honored to be here in this webinar on research, innovation and ranking as part of completion of 1 year of transformative reforms under National Education Policy 2020. Research and education have a symbiotic relationship. India had rich legacy in research from ancient times. Indian traditional research and knowledge system have played a vital role since time immemorial. Our research contribution to education, science and technology, medical sciences, and social sciences is widely acknowledged. As per our research contribution, we have been consistently growing in terms of our scientific contribution. India's scientific publications average annual growth in the last decade has been 10.7% against the global average of 3.83%. Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, has topped in the citation per faculty index in the recently released QS World University Ranking 2022. Moreover, in the citation per faculty index, there are 5 Indian higher education institutions in top 100 and 16 higher education institutions, including 6 universities, are in top 500. So, in the recent years, the overall performance in terms of research output has been encouraging. However, to take us to our rightful place in the global context, we need to make concerted efforts and increase investments for promotion of quality and relevant research in India. UGC has been promoting research through a number of fellowships, such as junior research fellowships and postdoctoral fellowships in different disciplines, and also for SCs, STs, women, and single girl child. UGC introduced a new scheme for transdisciplinary research for India's developing economy, STRIDE, for promoting research which is locally need-based, socially relevant, nationally important, and globally significant. A consortium for academic research and ethics care has been established in UGC for fostering quality research, academic integrity, and publication ethics. A 2-credit course on publication ethics has been introduced for PhD scholars. In respect of ranking, 35 Indian institutions have figured in QS World Ranking 2022. Ministry of Education and UGC seek to drive our institutions and universities on bettering the world ranking through Institutions of Eminence scheme. These institutions are expected to focus on multidisciplinary, high-quality research and internationalization. They have academic, administrative, and financial autonomy. Friends, ranking is also associated with excellence in teaching, research, and innovation. We must therefore focus on attaining academic excellence. Our former president and renowned scientist Bharat Ratna Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam once said, and I quote, "Excellence in thinking and action is the foundation for any mission. Excellence is not by accident. It is a process where an individual or organization or nation continuously strives to better oneself." With this, I reiterate the need to strive towards excellence with focus on research and innovation, which is cutting edge, collaborative, relevant, and aligned to our national priorities. I hope the vision enshrined in the National Education Policy 2020 and its focus on research, innovation, and ranking will contribute to the humanity and fulfill our quest of a self-reliant India, Atmanirbhar Bharat. Thank you all and Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, Professor D.P. Singh ji. Now I would like to invite our Secretary Sir, Shri Amit Khare ji, for opening remarks, sir.
Namaskar, Honorable Minister Dr. Rajkumar Ranjan Singh ji, Honorable MOS of Education and also Ministry of External Affairs, Principal Scientific Advisor Professor K. VijayRaghavan ji, Chairman UGC Professor D.P. Singh ji, Chairman AICTE Professor Anil Sahasbuddhe ji, Directors of Indian Institutes of Technology, Vice Chancellors, Director of IISc Bengaluru, distinguished panelists, Professor Radhakrishnan, Chairman of the Standing Committee of the IITs. I am really happy to be with you today morning as a part of the webinar which is being conducted on the occasion of the completion of 1 year of the National Education Policy. As we are well aware, this new education policy was announced almost 34 years after the previous policy, which was in existence since 1986. The earlier policy, known as NPE, National Policy on Education, 1986, which was slightly amended in the year 1992 with a plan of action. But it had been there for almost 34 years. And moreover, the challenges of the 21st century were not being reflected in the policy, and therefore under the guidance of the Prime Minister and with active contribution, in fact, most of the panelists who are present today had actively participated in the formulation of the policy. I recall many discussions which Professor VijayRaghavan had with during the meetings of the Honorable Prime Minister. Similarly, the directors of various institutions, they had contributed from time to time in the formulation of the policy. And the result was a policy which is forward-looking, futuristic, and prepares our students with a global outlook while being rooted in the Indian values and culture. I think a very important element of the national education policy has been the renewed focus on research and innovation. I would like to recall here that the Indian institutions in the last year or so have improved their rankings, particularly Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru, which scored a perfect 100 in various research parameters. And what is more encouraging is that the Honorable Prime Minister himself interacted with the directors of the institutions on 8th of July, just a month ago, to encourage them further, and was very glad to listen to the various initiatives being undertaken by our institutions. Professor VijayRaghavan is here with us, and I'm sure he will be able to give us more insights into how research and the better collaboration between the research laboratories which exist under the various scientific ministries, the research institutions which are there in the Ministry of Education, like the Indian Council of Social Science Research and other research councils, UGC, AICTE, and the institutions, how we can come together. One initiative this year, and I'm sure it must be at the behest of the Principal Scientific Advisor, Professor VijayRaghavan, is the concept of a glue grant, where we bring institutions together. For example, in Hyderabad, it has been mentioned in the budget speech of the Finance Minister, in Hyderabad, there are more than 40 central institutions. Can we bring them together so as to have more synergy and build upon the strengths of each other? Some may be having more strength, for example, the institutions of Department of Biotechnology. If they work together with our institutions of engineering and technology, and also with, say, the national law universities which exist now. There are 20 law universities all over the country. And then we develop a better ecosystem where the research institutions collaborate with each other. Along with research, the focus on innovation, and innovation starts from the early stages. In fact, the policy itself has shifted from teaching and learning to learning how to learn. The focus of the policy, as the Prime Minister himself had remarked last year, is to encourage children to acquire the skills so that they can learn. And that learning has to be reflected in their innovation and creativity. I'm glad that the innovation cell of the ministry, which is housed in AICT under Professor Abhay Jere, he is here with us. They have done very good work in organizing various innovative practices, including hackathons, starting from the school age, because research and this innovation does not mean only innovation at the level of PhD and beyond. Innovation or creativities can be developed very early. Another very important scheme which I would like to mention here, again under the guidance of the Principal Scientific Advisor, has been about the gifted children. It is already mentioned in the National Education Policy, called as Dhruv Tara. The brightest children, not in terms of academics, but in terms of creativity, are to be chosen and developed so that ultimately they become thought leaders and they contribute more to the society through their creativity and innovation. So both research and innovation, and importantly the ecosystem, is to be developed under the guidance of the Prime Minister, who has been, in fact, last month, sir, as the Honorable MOS would recall, the Prime Minister gave time twice in a single month. On 8th July, he interacted with the directors of our institutions, and again on 29th July, he addressed all of us on the occasion of completion of 1 year of the National Education Policy. I am sure, under the guidance of the Prime Minister and the cooperation of all, and also the Principal Scientific Advisor, who has been a leading light in the area of research and innovation, we will be able to do much better in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Secretary Sir. Now is the time for the keynote address. I would like to invite Dr. K. VijayRaghavan, Principal Scientific Advisor, for his address. Sir.
Sir, you are muted.
Muted.
I got it. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Namaskar, Honorable Minister for State for Education and External Affairs, Dr. Rajkumar Ranjan Singh, Shri Amit Khare, Secretary Education, Higher Education, Professor D.P. Singh, Chairman UGC, my colleague Dr. Abhay Jere is organizing this, and all the eminent panelists, Dr. Radhakrishnan, Dr. Bhaskar Ramurthy, Dr. Rangarajan, Rajat Muna, Ram Gopal Rao, and several others here. This is really a very wonderful occasion, celebrating the first year of the National Education Policy. And as we heard from the Higher Education Secretary, Mr. Amit Khare, this policy has been, something which has gone through extraordinary level of discussions and analysis and has come about. And it's really wonderful to see its implementation program at every level, from child education to higher education, rollout in this manner. We also heard from Dr. D.P. Singh about where India is in terms of research challenges broadly, and what are the successes, and importantly, what are the challenges going forward. It is important over 75 years of independence now for us to take great pride in broadly what we have done through the research ecosystem, not just in science, but in humanities, culture, arts also. And this is evident in many aspects of our life. India is one of the few post-colonial countries which invested in higher education and science, in addition to attending to principal problems such as health, public health, agriculture, and so on and so forth. Many other post-colonial countries invested only in the latter, and the result is they became cultures which lost their rootedness with their ground, with their history, and also a connect to globally changing science, technology, and research in general. India is fortunate that it managed to somehow maintain this connect. Yet there are many, many challenges going forward, and we should not, while celebrating our successes, forget about those challenges. And these are the challenges which the national education policy now aims to address very squarely without skirting around and trying to, just make small changes. It has made extraordinary and bold changes, and that is exactly what is necessary. Why is it that we need such bold changes? That, I think, can be looked at from the Prime Minister's statement on January 3rd, 2019, to the Indian Science Congress. There he said that we must establish a research ecosystem. Friends, our strength in research and development are built on the backbone of our national labs, central universities, IITs, TIFR, iSearch. However, 95% of our students go to state universities and colleges where research is still limited. A strong research ecosystem must be developed in these universities and colleges. And this is something which was a very important statement made in January 2019. The problem which we have in our research ecosystem is a simply stated one of two kinds. First is what was already stated previously by the Prime Minister, that a substantial amount of research goes to a few places, and I'll elaborate on that. But there's another more fundamental issue. Where is our research interest rooted in? And we've got extraordinary agencies such as ISRO, DRDO, DST, DBT, DAE, which have taken on under very difficult situation missions which are rooted here. So that is, of course, very, very creditable. But we've also had many large institutional directions which have excelled, made high quality contributions to research all over the world, but their rootedness is such that they could be anywhere in the planet or indeed anywhere outside the planet. They are just measuring quality but not connectedness. So a big challenge going forward in research is how does one have connectedness with international quality? If the international quality benchmarks are rooted only on derivatives of science and technology, how many X did you train? How many fellowships of what academies did you get? How many papers? How many patents? These in some ways are very important metrics, but they're derivatives of our science and technology research. The core research must also have impact from the fundamental to the applied in our ecosystem. So that connect is very, very important. Now, state-funded research in India has pretty much been carried out in government laboratories on scale. So in order to promote domestic capabilities in research at a very intense level, this was what was done post-independence. Today, only our elite research, our elite institutions get substantial research funding. And by elite, I include the list which the Prime Minister mentioned in his speech. So 298 is the rough calculation, close to 300 academic institutions out of about 40,000 higher education institutions get the bulk of research funding. Now you can argue that the rest are not capable of absorbing even if you have resources. And so the challenge is not only expanding the footprint of science, but also to make sure that they're capable of getting funding to do quality work. And that's a challenge. And as I said, most of the students go to state institutions. Now, if you look at global indicators, and this is again very standard, countries like Sweden, Australia, Canada, USA have several thousand researchers per million, and we have something like a couple of hundred researchers per million. So there also, we have to expand, and the expansion must connect India and Bharat. Right now, if you look at metrics only for the so-called elite, and funding going to the elite, and the elite population as a denominator, India comes out quite well. But if you add all of India as a denominator, there are big, big challenges. So our challenge is to expand the footprint of quality science across the country and see how one can, have global best practices in the funding stream and in the research stream going forward. So the problem what is the problem which we need to solve? And I'll end over here and just tell you a little bit of the potential solutions. We have many Indian universities now increasingly coming higher and higher up in the ranking. Now that is good, but that again should be a consequence of the baseline and the strong structures developing, and not by trying to chase the rating metrics alone. And many institutions are doing that. Kudos to them. But the requirement in our research system is what people have called patient capital, capital which takes a long time to yield. And that kind of patient capital can come only from government. Yet government funding for research in India is substantial, given we are a poor country, and industry funding is modest. So we need to figure out a structure where industry which has capital can mitigate risk, and the partnership between industry and research laboratories together with government capital to spread research in our ecosystem is one way out. So this is the idea behind a structure which was proposed in the National Education Policy. This is the National Research Foundation, and it will be similar to many such foundations which have been set up all over the world and have transformed those countries. 50 years ago, the National Science Foundation transformed America. Today, high quality research can be done in a very small American university, not just in the top few. Similarly, UK has integrated its research agencies into the UK Research and Innovation. Singapore, Korea, Switzerland, many countries have had structures now where integrated synergistic funding, collaborating with other funding agencies to make sure you drive in an outcome dependent manner is done. These foundations also do one more very important. They measure the outcomes in our system. Today, if we ask our ecosystem about what is happening, say, in research in a particular area, whether it's drone or underwater marine research or malaria, then we end up aggregating the sums of what all has been done by multiple agencies. The National Research Foundation will also summarize all these inputs and outcomes and impact so that we know how to measure our successes by what impact it has on the field, not just by how much money we have put in a particular area. This then allows synergy between various funding organizations to come together and meet with success. So this is a very important area which will happen. So in this kind of an approach, our science funding and our humanities and social sciences funding must be synergized with many approaches, but with the National Research Foundation being in some ways a integrator as well as a core funder of this kind of research. So we should address science-based solutions for chronic problems, including conservation of groundwater, crop diversification, reduction of subsidies, for example, practical solutions to societal development, financial, techno-economic challenges of the nation, and so on. Now, all these seem very applied, but at the core of this in today's world, which you've seen at the introduction to the National Education Policy, lies the application of basic fundamental science of all kinds, from chips to sensors to data handling to research in humanities, economics, and so on. So such an integrative approach is absolutely vital. I'd like to end by saying that for this to work, we must light what I'd like to call the dark fibers of talent in our already existing institutional structures. Each of our institutions, if you go to them, if you go to the Central Potato Research Institute in Himachal, you go to the Building Research Institute, or you go to IIT Madras, you will find extraordinary talented people who have practiced their technology, their science, and their art and know the field. Yet the ecosystem is not open enough yet to accept them as leaders who will see the growth of such capabilities in the entire ecosystem. So our national labs, our research institutions, our established humanities institutions, their talent, this dark fiber must be lit so that they seed the growth in our young population across our university systems to success. And this is eminently feasible. And this is the giving end. At the receptor end, there's another big challenge, which I think we can also overcome. our institutions need to open up. Our state universities, our many colleges. There is research possible at every level, at some level or the other in every location. All these institutions need to be able to receive talent from all over the country and have a growth of research in chosen areas according to their location, their interest, their drive, and so on and so forth. For that to happen, we need administrative structural reform in these places so that they function well. And the national education policy has addressed that very strongly. But that puts in place the plumbing, as it were. The water supply of reform must also go to these places. And again, we must all work together there. So working together to use the talent we have, working together to make sure that the talent can expand, our institutional structures are changed, anything is possible. Because of our long-term investment in these capabilities, we can now go forward and do things in 5 years and 10 years, which other countries would have taken 50. And that is our task. Thank you very much.
Advisor. I would now like to invite Chief Guest of the Day, Dr. Rajkumar Ranjan Singh, our Honorable Minister, for the inaugural address. Sir, please.
Dr. VijayRaghavan, Principal Scientific Advisor, Government of India. Shri Amit Khare ji, Secretary, Higher Education. And Professor D.P. Singh, Chairman, UGC. Professor Anil ji, AICTE. And Abhay Jare, Chief Innovation Officer. And Rakesh Ranjan ji, and others, the Vice Chancellors, Directors of all the institutions whomsoever join in this joint venture. And perhaps more than thousands of participants are joining in this webinar. So good morning to all of you. I wish to congratulate our entire team of Ministry of Education for initiating this national webinar series on the occasion of completing 1 year of National Education Policy 2020. I believe that today's webinar on research, innovation, and ranking is one of the most critical in this series, as we need to ensure that all our educational institutions make focus effort for promoting high quality research and innovation within their campuses, which will in turn help in improving their ranking on global platform. Since ages, Indian culture always promoted research, innovation, and culture of curiosity within our society, and undoubtedly we have made significant contributions in the field of education, philosophy, medicine, and yoga over the years. Right from Indus Valley civilization to the great work of our rishis like Charak, Sasurat, Panini, Aryabhat, and even our modern day scientists like Sir C.V. Raman, Homi Bhabha, Ramanujan, etc. Our culture highlight our deep-rooted commitment of science, research, and innovation. Now, our new India, under the able leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, is determined to further strengthen this commitment of science and innovation, and we are committed to further broaden our horizon, considering our Vasudev Vakuman philosophy. Moreover, considering the 75th anniversary celebration of India's independence, I appeal to all researchers, academicians, and innovators to aggressively work on projects which can benefit entire humanity. We need to generate great ideas and have global relevance. We need to reclaim our identity as knowledge-based society. In recent years, India has seen an exponential increase in the number of scientific publications and is currently in the third position globally, as the update figure has already mentioned by the Chairman University Grants Commission. India has recorded the fastest average annual growth rate of publication between 2008 and 2018 with 10.73%. We are also at the third position in the number of PhD in science and engineering. If I can use Olympic jargon, then I can say that we are currently bronze medalists in number of scientific publications and number of PhD produced annually, but we cannot be satisfied with this performance. We want goal. And when I say we want goal, I mean in all aspects, not just in number, but more importantly in quality. Currently, citations for majority of our publications are abysmally low, and this needs to be improved upon heavily. We need to focus on ideas having relevance without compromising our own excellence. Hence, I'm very happy to know that in today's webinar, we are going to discuss relevance and excellence together. Moreover, we need to ensure that PhD work of scholar just does not lie on shelf, but is logically taken further. Every attempt needs to be made to convert those work into innovative solution, product or platform which can further uplift our standard of living in a very sustainable fashion. I take this opportunity to appeal to all researchers and academicians to involve as innovator. Do your startup create wealth for yourself, your institute, and in turn for our country, as we are aspiring to become $5 trillion economy by 2025. We need to evolve as a knowledge-based economy. Bharat needs to evolve as global innovation hub. Our higher education institutions need to evolve as center of excellence in innovations and entrepreneurship. It is imperative that India become a growth engine for the world and provide a new model of inclusive development by contributing large number of open source technologies to the developing and developed world. To become Atmanirbhar, as I said earlier, quality of innovation is of utmost importance. We cannot settle for inferior technologies. We need to strive for excellence and nothing less than excellence. COVID pandemic has given a good opportunity to Indian entrepreneurs to lead the world through frugal innovations. The rapid development of various solutions in our fight against COVID is the great example of our Atmanirbhar Bharat philosophy. The development of vaccines for corona made Bharat self-reliant. So now it is high time that we should change our mindset to look at other countries for solution and develop problem solving mentally within our people. We need to get rid of these followers mentally. Since last 7 years, Ministry of Education has made systematic efforts to promote high-quality research and innovation within our higher education institutions. 3 years back, we established Ministry's Innovation Cell to systematically enhance our educational institutions on aspects related to promoting innovation and entrepreneurship. Our Innovation Cell works on its 4 pillars of excellence, that is, policy intervention and facilitating national and international platform for Indian and global students. Through our Innovation Cell, we have established Innovation Council in thousands of educational institutions and have trained large number of faculty as innovation ambassadors. Apart from NIRF ranking, which gauges academic and research impact of our higher education institutions, we have also started ARIIA ranking to rank our educational institution on innovation and entrepreneurial achievement. Smart India Hackathon has now evolved into world's biggest open innovations model. Now, Ministry is taking this concept to encourage with youngsters of other countries like Asians, Portugals, etc. Our other major schemes like Imprint, Impress, Spark, and Yukti have also started yielding great results. Our innovations and enterprising youths are doing wonders, and as government, we are leaving no stone unturned to facilitate them with whatever they require, be it good infrastructure or policy interventions. We can comfortably call 2021 as the year of unicorn startup. India has produced 17 unicorns in 2021 so far, in spite of the debilitating coronavirus crisis. So, if we focus on excellence in research, innovation, and entrepreneurship, then it is imperative that our ranking as a nation on various ranking mechanisms will improve considerably. In 2015, India's rank on Global Innovation Index was 81. And because of our sustained effort in last 6 years, we have considerably improved our position and have now jumped to 48th rank. Similarly, as per Bloomberg latest innovation index of 2021, India's rank is 50th in the state in terms of innovation, and we have moved up 4 places as compared to last year. These indices demonstrate our government's continued commitment towards transforming the country into an innovation-driven economy. But I sincerely believe that these ranks are in no way close to our real potential. Hence, I appeal to every academician, researchers, and innovator to make every possible effort and strive for getting India within top 10 rank in the next 3 years. When it comes to ranking system like Times or QS, used for comparing the global educational institutions, we need to have many more institutions in top 100 rank. You are aware that our National Education Policy 2020 has laid great emphasis on research and innovation and has recommended multiple interventions for promoting them within our educational institutions. It stressed to prompting design thinking, critical thinking, and problem-solving mindset within our students. Moreover, it has recommended setting up National Research Foundation under the leadership of Principal Scientific Advisor to ensure better coordinations among various R&I funding agencies. NRF will have special emphasis on promoting high-quality research and innovation activities, especially in our state universities. So I believe that our new education policy will result in tectonic shift in Indian education system. And I hope that webinar like this will certainly help all to understand the pioneering work this government is doing in the field of education. I also hope that this interaction will motivate our youngsters for pursuing and demanding excellence in research and innovation, and soon we will be able to reach the zenith in this sector. I take this opportunity to appeal other ministries also to join hands with Ministry of Education as real innovation happen at the interface of diverse sector. So let us work together, let us collaborate, let us innovate together and create impact which we all will be proud of it. Namaskar, thank you. Jai Hind.
Dhanyavad, Honorable Minister. I would now like to invite Dr. Abhay Jere, Chief Innovation Officer, Innovation Cell, Ministry of Education, for vote of thanks. Dr. Abhay.
Thank you, sir. Honorable Minister, sir, your address was really very motivating and insightful. We believe that your emphasis on excellence is going to be very, very critical. And today, throughout this webinar, we will ensure that this message is taken forward to all the institutions. And we will ensure that under the leadership of guidance of Amit Khare sir, that we have good policies, good programs in converting your vision into reality. So thank you very much, sir, for joining us for this webinar as chief guest. Amit sir, we continuously discuss this and we believe that we will be able to take this vision forward. I also wish to thank Professor D.P. Singh ji, Chairman AICT, for giving his opening remarks. Professor VijayRaghavan, sir, Principal Scientific Advisor to Prime Minister, has given us the direction, and when he spoke about NRF and the efforts being done by government to take forward, sir, under your leadership and guidance, we will ensure that we will take some of these projects forward and we will be continuously interacting with you, and we have been interacting with you, and some of the programs which Innovation Cell is doing has been conceived based on our interaction, sir. So thank you very much, sir, for joining this webinar and sharing with us our thought. I'll also wish to thank Professor Anil Sahasrabuddha, sir, Chairman AICT, because for the entire innovation cell's support is coming from AICT, sir, and the guidance which you give us on day-to-day basis for taking projects forward is of immense value. Finally, I wish to thank my colleague Rakesh Ranjan sir for helping us in every possible way and organizing this webinar. And we will together ensure that the message which we wish to convey on new education policy is taken forward, and the webinar actually helps ignite the spirit of research, innovation, excellence within our youngsters. So thank you very much, Mohit, for conducting this session. And finally, the most importantly, we need to thank all the prestigious dignitaries who have joined us remotely, and all the viewers, vice chancellors, director, deans. Currently, I see we have more than 10,000 people actually live. So together we have to join hand, and we will ensure that India will achieve excellence in research, innovation, and which will help us promote ourselves on global ranking. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Jere. So we would now be concluding this inaugural session and we'll be moving for panel discussion. And before that, I would like to say we'll have a pause for 2 minutes and then we would begin with panel discussions. So just allow me a pause for 2 minutes and we will gather again. Thank you so much. So very good, warm welcome to everyone again for the panel discussion. We would be beginning with panel discussion 1, ensuring excellence and relevance in research. And we have from here Chairman AICTE Professor Anil Sahasrabudhe, our Additional Secretary Sir, Abhay, and others as our viewers. And the panel discussion 1 will be moderated by Professor Rajat Muna, Director IIT Bhilai. Professor Muna is the founding director of IIT Bhilai. He also served as the Director General of the Center for Development of Advanced Computing, CDAC, India, during 2011 to 2017. He is also a professor of computer science at IIT Kanpur. Our first panelist is Dr. K. Radhakrishnan. Dr. K. Radhakrishnan is a person who don't need any formal introduction, but as a courtesy. He's an Indian space scientist who headed the Indian Space Research Organization as chairman. He has been Secretary of Department in Space. Prior to this, he was the director of Vikram Sarabhai Space Center, director of National Remote Sensing Agency of the Department of Space. Presently, he is the chairperson of the Board of Governors of Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, and chairman of the Standing Committee of the IIT Council, besides being honorary distinguished advisor in the Department of Space/ISRO. Then our second panelist, Professor Govindan Rangarajan. Professor Rangarajan is currently the director of Indian Institute of Science in Bengaluru. Prior to IISc, he worked at the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, University of California, Berkeley, before returning to India in 1992. He has been a faculty member of the Department of Mathematics, IISc, since 1992. He is also currently serving as the director of Indo-French Center for Applied Mathematics. Then we have panelist 3, Professor Bhaskar Ramamurthy. Professor Bhaskar is currently the director of IIT Madras, his alma mater, since September 2011. He is MS PhD in Electrical Engineering from University of California at Santa Barbara. After working at AT&T Bell Laboratories for a couple of years, he joined the faculty of IIT Madras in 1986. I would now like to request Professor Rajat Muna to please begin the panel discussion, ensuring excellence and relevance in research, sir. Professor Muna.
Thank you. Thank you, Rakesh ji. In fact, this particular panel discussion is a very interesting panel discussion which connects the excellence and relevance of research. Often it is said that research excellence and research excellence and research this cannot go, relevance cannot go together. And in our panel, we have 3 very distinguished luminary scientists who have actually proved this particular, the institutes which have actually, they're representing, have proved that this particular understanding that innovation, excellence, and its relevance cannot go together. They have actually proved that particular statement false. And we are very, very delighted to have 3 very distinguished panelists along with me here. The format of the panel discussion that we are taking is we will actually request all the 3 panelists to give first position for about 5 minutes each. And then after that, we will actually start with question answers, general questions and specific questions. And that's the way we will actually go ahead. So without taking much time, may I invite Dr. Radhakrishnan to take this opportunity and give his first positional statement. Thank you. I think Professor Radhakrishnan has to be unmuted. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajat Muna. Good morning to distinguished panelists and everyone who is participating in this program. It was a delight to listen to the distinguished speakers of the inaugural session on what we have achieved over the last 1 year and what our targets are for the future under the NEP 2020. Let me also recall here that NEP 2020 aims to transform India into a vibrant knowledge society and global knowledge superpower. Notably, the world around us is advancing rapidly in science and technology. And the rapidity of this advancement is exemplified by the concept of disruptive technologies and the fourth industrial revolution that were coined in the past decade. Also, globally, there is a collective campaign for the Sustainable Development Goals SDG 2030. There is a growing global concern on climate change and the impending natural hazards. Preparedness to combat pandemic possibilities of varied nature has become another global priority. We talk about big science, we talk about deep technology. This has been going on for several decades. But now, a confluence of these two, the big science and deep technology, is becoming increasingly relevant to solve the most formidable societal problems. We still have a long way to go. All the great things that we have done, all the recognitions that we have got globally, especially over the last few years, of taking the Global Innovation Index ranking for India from 60 to 40, or improving the Global Competitiveness Index to again the median level, are commendable. But still, we have a long way to go. If you look at big science and look at the top 50, we don't find more than 3-4 institutions in that range. And if you go to top 200, yes, there are a few. We still have a lot of import dependence for the capital goods and equipment, materials, electronic devices, etc. And we should be able to reduce this significantly in a mission mode, especially for the strategic sector, for the health sector. And I'm extremely happy that Dr. Ramamurthy is present here, who will talk to us about what has happened in the mobile communication, 5G, etc. We also will listen to Professor Rangarajan about excellence in research, for which IAS is globally known. Question today in front of us is ensuring excellence and relevance in research is an imperative national need and a right demand on the academic community and the R&D community of this country. I would stop at this point and then look at the questions that you will be putting to us. Thank you, Professor Muna.
You are muted, Professor Muna.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Radhakrishnan, for your thoughts. May I request Professor Govindan Rangarajan to take stage and give his position?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So let me talk about, this excellence in research and relevance of the research. I would break it down as far as excellence in research is concerned into a few components. One is, first-rate faculty members. Without first-rate faculty members, we cannot pursue excellence in research. And when you are trying to recruit high-quality faculty members, one cannot be reactive and wait for them to apply. we need to go proactively after high quality faculty members who may be all somewhere else in India or across the world, and encourage them to apply. So therefore, it is, some of the premier institutions have been doing this, but I think it's also important that all other universities also do this in order to get high quality faculty, that we have to organize recruitment events abroad where we and elsewhere in India, and also, meet potential faculty members and encourage them to apply. But once you have hired excellent faculty members, we also need a system which enforces accountability. Here, there's a very important recommendation of the NEP 2020, which is the tenure track system. And the IAC has been following the tenure track system for quite a while. And we believe this is one system which, everybody can adopt. There's always a fear sometimes in some institutions that when you have a tenure track system, maybe good faculty members will not join. Maybe they are afraid that their job may go away after 5 years, 6 years, and so on. But I think that is wrong. Our experience with tenure track system has been that we do not lose good faculty members because they're confident that they will do very well in this 5-6 year period, and they indeed do very well. But it's very important to have this tenure track system so that you can never be perfect. No recruitment system can be perfect. You are going to make mistakes, and there are going to be some faculty members who are not performing to their true potential, who are, their promise when they were hired. And it's important to let go of a few of them, a few of such faculty members, so that the whole system is then strengthened, and you always aim for excellence in research. Of course, hand in hand with this, you also have to provide a carrot. You cannot just have strict tenure track system without providing the necessary support. So what is required also is a generous startup grant, which will allow them to hit the ground running. And we also need to reward performing faculty members, maybe with additional grants for students, travel, consumables, and so on. So both the carrot and the stick in this case go hand in hand. And another component of excellence in research, especially these days, is multidisciplinarity and teamwork. Multidisciplinarity is again one theme which is strongly encouraged in NEP 2020. Indian institutions have been traditionally weak in this area. This whole area of collaboration in teams, multidisciplinarity needs to be incentivized. Institutions also need to look at another important aspect which is related to this, which is promotion criteria. Often, institutions value individual contributions more than collaborative contributions. This needs to change. There needs to be an emphasis on collaborations also, but there may be several equal partners that should be recognized and rewarded. I think that's very important because these days, it's practically in every area except in few areas like math and so on. Everybody works in teams, and you have to reward teamwork. And I think organizations like ISRO have been doing that with great success. So universities need to emulate that. In IAC, we have had a whole division devoted to interdisciplinary sciences, and many of these centers in this division are focused on research areas that are relevant to the current needs of the nation. So research excellence can go hand in hand with relevant research. These centers focus on areas such as energy, water, autonomous systems, including drones and robotics, data science, transportation, nanoscience, and so on. So one could also consider establishing such interdisciplinary centers and divisions which bring together faculty from different divisions. We also have an interdisciplinary PhD program, where each PhD student has 2 research advisors, which again encourages multidisciplinarity. So all these things need to be considered. And another third critical factor is the research infrastructure. Here is where I think government support is extremely critical. Universities and institutions need to have high-end equipment with competent technical staff to man them, and equally importantly, recurring grants for consumables and salaries for technical staff. Last 2 are often a challenge. Many people tell me that it's much easier in the Indian system to get capital grants for equipment, but it's very difficult to maintain them in working condition once you have acquired these equipment. So I think government needs to consciously fund such consumables and recurring grants to maintain such high-end equipment. And one can also think of setting up national sophisticated instrumentation facilities where you have multiple versions of the same equipment, and the whole model could be structured such that students and faculty from universities across the country can come to these centers, spend 3-4 months there. So they should have accommodation, everything for them, and they do their experiments and are able to then publish high quality research. This will also ensure collaboration between multiple institutions. I think this is something which needs to be done. And as PSA pointed out, there are maybe some institutions where there may not be the necessary infrastructure to establish such facilities. In such cases, I think it's important. Maybe it can be located in some of the premier institutions, such facilities, national facilities, but it's very important that they have a national governance structure which ensures that most of the access to such facilities goes to other universities and not to the host institution. So with such measures, I think one can definitely aim for excellence in research. And maybe later on, I'll talk about more the relevant research. So I talked briefly about that. I'll talk about it later. Thank you. You're muted.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Rangarajan, for very interesting aspect that you brought out in terms of HR and multidisciplinary activities. I now take this opportunity to invite Professor Bhaskar Ramamurthy, Director of IIT Madras, to give his positional statement.
Am I audible, Rajat? Just a check, sound check.
Yes, you are audible.
Thank you.
Yes.
Very good morning to all those assembled in this webinar. I want to also express my gratitude for having this opportunity to participate in this important webinar today and in this panel. What I will do is use my time for the positional statement to make a couple of points. One of the points I want to make is about this issue of relevant research and excellence. I was already, Dr. Radhakrishnan has already hinted that I should focus on this, given our particular experience in this, recently in this, in working on 5G. But in any case, I think it's an important point, and I will talk about it. I'll also make one or two other points, but related particularly to the NEP and particularly to what the PSA, Professor VijayRaghavan talked about regarding broad basing of research. Let me first talk about the issue of relevance and excellence. Using this, the recent example, this is not the only example, but this is a recent one on what has happened recently in the case of 5G research. Very briefly, it turns out that in terms of our requirement in India for cellular wireless mobile coverage, we have always had, this is nothing to do with 5G, from the time of 2G, we've had a requirement that our rural areas have a very different use case. You may be surprised to know that the only use case that was defined by ITU for rural coverage, the only case they would test against for performance for any new standard that has been proposed, is the high speed highway or the train user. That means 120 kilometers per hour traveling on a highway or a train. How would the mobile wireless system serve such a user? This was the use case that was tested, the only rural use case that was tested ever in 2G, 3G, and 4G. For the first time in the case of 5G, I think India took the lead, and in 2016 at ITU, we proposed that there is another very important use case. And we've always known this, but the lack of our ability to do relevant and excellent research up to that time at a scale at which you would be noticed. It's not that it was not thought about and talked about by some of us, but we were not operating at scale. We went and conveyed to ITU that we have a different use case. We have 900 million people living in 650,000 habitations. If you parachute yourself in India anywhere in the plains, pretty much 85% of the country, and walk less than 2 kilometers, you will reach another habitation. This is absolutely true. This is not a statistical statement. And the second point is actually, again, this is only a semi-statistical statement. It's true for a large part of the country. I can tell you that you are within, you know, in a rural, even in a rural area in India, you are within 50 meters, shouting distance of another individual. This is even in the fields. That's the way our population density is, even taking statistics into account. Very different use case. There is no comparable rural use case anywhere else in the world. Maybe in Africa there is, but they have even less of a voice than us. In the West, they don't have. They have large tracts of land with very few people occupying, you know, small habitations here and there. So we said that this is not covered at all by these technologies. This use case, what is the performance you want to provide for these people, is not covered at all. And we came up with some requirements. Of course, globally, there was some give and take and it was diluted a little bit. And finally, when the standard was evolved, the standard was not addressing this sufficiently well enough. And we had to propose an enhanced version of the 5G standard called 5GI, which ITU has accepted as one of the 2 global 5G standards, which actually meets much better our rural requirements. And we had to do this in a very careful way, given that India cannot have the luxury of, doesn't have the ecosystem to go ahead and make its own equipment at scale, deploy it at scale and so on. We could not do this using ideas that were completely orthogonal to what the rest of the world is doing. We had to do it in a very interoperable and compatible way, so that the economies of scale, global ecosystem, etc., are not lost to us. And so it's a kind of research that is very different. It's very constrained by what you can do, what you can't do, and yet you need new ideas. It is not basic research in the sense of, you know, when you're working on science, certain types of science, which you're not worried about immediate applications, you're not even thinking about applications. It is not that kind. That is universal. That's pretty much similar everywhere in the world. But this is research which is of a different kind. And there are many such examples you can come up with. I think we have not even looked at transportation in our country the right way, our urban transportation. Our urban transportation situation is very different from that in the rest of the world for various reasons. Some which are fixable, some which are not fixable. And we are not defining the problems well enough. And there are actually very, very chunky problems that can be worked on in all these things, water, healthcare. There is a problem here, and I want to address this, that part of the issue of excellence is also credibility and acceptance by your peers, by the world at large. And here, if the kind of problems that you are working on, the kind of problems you're defining are not comprehensible to certain influential sections in the world, then it's difficult to get the peer recognition, to peer acceptance of what you're doing. And that is something we have faced in the wireless case. It's been a big challenge for us to even convey to the rest of the world why this is important. And the same thing is true, I would say, for our urban transportation problem, for our water issues and so on. And this also keeps a lot of very bright people away from tackling these problems, because they don't want, they want to be seen as doing something. And if you want to interact, I mean, after all, ideas don't come in a vacuum. And you have to want to publish, you want to be read, you want to be seen. And if your problem, if the editor says, we don't see why this is important, then how do you publish? So, and then the other problem we have from our country is because we struggle to work on these things, we don't do our own grading of the work, of the level of the importance of the work. You know, we mix every work is important. Even the mildly innovative work is important. Even the highly applied work, which is very local, which is very specialized to a particular application, is important. But we don't grade these separately. We don't segregate these, and we mix all this together. And sometimes people feel that, oh, these are not really important, challenging problems. Okay, so we need to really address this. In a short period, I can't go into in great detail, but there are a number of things where the research, except for the very basic sciences, I would say, where the research a lot of the research can be very challenging, can be very important, and can be relevant, but may not be globally relevant, or the global relevance may be there, but may not be obvious. We claim actually that some of the work we have done for this 5GI standard, which is now called, is going to be actually very important for the rest of the world, but they take time for them to realize it. So even for non-rural application. So how do we stay the course? How do we maintain our presence? We need credible journals. We need to get together. The best in India must get together and lend voice and say that this is important, and maintain that even in the face of some initial incredulity. So these are all some of the things that I want to, there are many, many important things here. we probably need to gather separately to discuss this. The last thing I want to mention before I stop this part of my intervention is that in the context of broad-basing research, we had one retreat in Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy in 2019, in which many people were invited, and there is a report from that retreat, but on this issue, which dealt with, among other things, this issue. But I think one of the things we can do is really get volunteers. I would think this should be largely voluntary, though we can support the effort a little bit. From our elite institutions, from our elite research scientists and technologists, to volunteer to spend 2 weeks to 4 weeks at various institutions. You know, we have a list of them now through the NRF, but even outside that list, spend some time to go there, interact with the students, interact with the faculty, figure out what research, expose them to research, connect them. It may not be in your own domain, but you are knowledgeable enough to connect them to other people in the, maybe there's a particular focus of strength there because there is a role model faculty there who's really, lighting the fire in everybody's belly. So you want to connect them to somebody in some institution in India where that is very strong. Today, everybody is comfortable with the online medium. You can use your connections, connect them. You yourself can interact with them. It's something like a scientist in residence kind of scheme. And everything has been measured. Even if it's volunteer, the output of this person, we have to measure it. Has over a 2-year period, has that institution been able to enthuse some people to go into research? Has that institution been able to get into research itself? I think, again, I leave it at this with a very broad brush suggestion, but I think we can do a lot in this direction if we work the details of this scheme, these kind of schemes, these kind of ideas out. And I would stop at this, but I think we can do a tremendous amount in broad-basing research and in doing more relevant, but very high quality and very challenging research, and actually showing its relevance not just to ourselves, but the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ramurthy. You have actually brought out some very interesting concept here of relevance of research vis-a-vis excellence, because excellence is often measured with reference to parameters set by journal publishers and all that, and which often are not relevant for local research. And relevance of research is primarily the local aspects. And while the relevance of research may be very, very high challenging thing today, and it may not be seen by the global world in that way immediately, maybe in time they recognize the relevance. Very, very interesting aspect for broad-basing the research. I also take this opportunity to actually say we had a lot of excitement about NEP 2020s. In last 1 year, there have been a lot of talks which have been going around. People have been seeing NEP 2020, and there is a palpable excitement that one can see in various engineering institutions and various organizations and all that. And in my belief, NEP 2020 is a great enabler for multidisciplinary research, as well as it provides flexibility in academic programs. The Indian prestigious institutes like IITs, IISc Bangalore, all academic institutes of that nature had always had some of these ingredients in their academic programs. And they actually were the champion of such a philosophy. While NEP 2020 is likely to provide a great impetus to research to various other institutes, it is equally likely to benefit the IITs and IISc in a major way. It has already been 1 year, since policy was unveiled. We actually hear a lot of people talking about it. But in letter and spirit, there are two differences. So my question is, how do you think that IITs and IISc can help other institutes in adopting NEP 2020 in letter as well as in spirit? I would request Professor Ramurthy to first take this.
Yeah, maybe I should have kept my second intervention to this point. I think really this is one of the ways in which not just IITs and the tier 1 education institutions, but even the tier 1 laboratories and others, the scientists, the various people from even industry, I would say, if they are willing to spend the time. The idea that the suggestion that I was making, that we should actually have people go and spend time as a scientist and or engineer or technologist in residence, even in social sciences, I would say, and really try to understand what's possible in that institution, try to encourage what's going in the right direction, try to give some mentoring, connect them to people using the online medium to which will take them forward. I would say maintain your own connection to them even after you go back home, and really whether it's volunteer or not, outputs have to be measured, and those who do well have to be recognized, and the institutions that do well have to be rewarded, have to be encouraged. So we really need to broad-based research across the country. I think it can be done in a way in which some resources will be needed, but not necessarily by showering resources from the sky at the whole country. The other point I would like to make is that I think every country has evolved its own model of funding or providing resources for research. Most of the funding for research in all countries, contrary to public common perception, comes from the government. It's public funded. I can prove this to you even in the examples that people often give about how in other countries private funding and so on. It's not true. In any case, a significant part of it comes from public funding, and each country has evolved its own method. In India, if you take typically, and most of the funding right now is for the 298 or 300 institutions that Professor VijayRaghavan was mentioning, which are mostly public institutions. The salary of the faculty member comes from the concerned ministry. The scholarships for the researchers come very often from that ministry, and also from science ministries and other ministries which have scholarship schemes. And then funding for supporting the research in terms of equipment funding and other things comes from the science ministries. And these are not linked in our case. If you take the US, for example, it all comes in you apply for you submit proposal, if it gets approved, even part of your salary comes from that. And the overheads for running the institution significantly come from that. And the PhD scholarships come from that. So everything gets attached to some evaluation process, some assessment process. Here, that's not happening. We have to find our own ways. We don't have to necessarily go to the US system, but we have to find our own ways to link this up. I'll just throw a little bit of a spanner in the works. It may upset a lot of people, but in many of our elite institutions, our faculty are supposed to do research for 50% of the time, which includes the 3 months when there's no classes. So why not link the salary which is paid by the ministry supporting that institution, but why not link it to having approved research projects with funding or without funding? It doesn't matter. Some people may not need funding, but still a plan which they promise to execute and which is evaluated. Okay, so that the 3 months of salary for doing, which is roughly this time for where you do a lot of research, is actually tied to some accountability. Okay, so I'm just throwing some ideas, but I think this is not the place to sit and brainstorm ideas, but just to show you that we can do a lot within our system. We don't have to necessarily throw out the system and copy something lock, stock, and barrel from somewhere else, which may not work for us. Thank you very much. Dr. Professor Muna. So maybe Professor Anil Sahasrabudhe or somebody can, till he joins back. He's come back. He's come back.
You're muted.
Yeah, I was on mute. Professor Rangarajan?
Yeah.
Well, maybe you can also take this.
Yeah. So one way one can help in all institutions in implementing NEP in letter and spirit is by example. By implementing it in your own institution and setting an example and show that it works, and then demonstrate to other institutions. As far as getting them to do, one of the main points of NEP 2020 is the research excellence through the NRF and other things. So one way which the government can ensure that the research is indeed broad-based is to ensure that a significant fraction of the projects that they fund need to be consortium-based projects where you have to have elite institutions partnering with other maybe not so elite institutions in putting forth these projects. This is often the case in other countries like the US. When you set up national centers of excellence and so on by NSF and Department of Energy, they require you to come together as a team and execute the project. I think more and more we need to insist on that and ensure that there is participation by not just universities but also colleges. This will ensure that the research excellence spreads to a large fraction of the educational institutions and research institutions. And one should also explore. I mean, we are, for example, thinking of moving into medical research. I think all institutions should also get into such areas like medical research and so on, which will make our research much more relevant, where you can apply science, engineering, and so on into medical research. So I think these are some of the things, and mission mode projects are always gaining more traction. These also ensure that many institutions can contribute to them. But I think the best way to ensure implementation of NEP is, do it and show it by example that it can be done successfully while maintaining quality. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rangarajan. Dr. Radhakrishnan, you have guided one of the best Indian research showcasing in ISRO, and this is one organization and one program for which all of us as Indians are extremely proud of. It is a program which actually has adopted all the indigenously developed technologies. All the technologies were actually homegrown, and it is actually a very, very interesting program which has actually shown the excellence all over the world. We have already, explored and sent out our missions in Mars and Moon and so many space program activities that we have all very, very interestingly witnessed. Now, this is something that we are all very proud of, and you were at the hem of the things. You are also now the chairman of Board of Governor of IIT Kanpur, which is yet another hallmark institute of research of India. Where do you see the Indian research assisting such large programs like space and defense that you have handled, and how do you think NEP 2020 is likely to help the research outputs of Indian education systems to be used in these programs in a fruitful manner? So over to you.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, NEP 2020 will make a paradigm shift. It will change the way we all think within the institutions, within the departments, and also for taking up programs between the departments, talking about synergy. And if you look at specifically what happened during the last 1 year, thanks to the pandemic situation, we saw several groups coming up with end-to-end products and processes. At Kanpur IIT, we had the famous ventilator project. It was a spontaneous action, end-to-end done in 90 days, with quality, reliability, and safety for the patients, which is being used today. And if you talk about, again, the multidisciplinary activity, we are almost there to set up the School of Medical Technology and Research, like Dr. Rangarajan talked about. They also have plans to bring science and the medicine together. Here we are talking about medical technology, equipment, etc., etc. So the thinking process changes. This is first and foremost. We also took look at national problems of very high level, like cyber security center. This is one such example where we look at mega problems. Let me come to the ISRO. See, all IITs and IAC put together, we have a strength of 7,500 faculty members. And these are some of the best in the world, and certainly the best in this country. And if you look at ISRO, we have an S&T staff of almost 7,800. They do projects, they do operations, they do research and development, they do design, etc., etc. So there is a comparable mass of brilliance available in both the places. What makes ISRO different? Essentially, it is the focus. There is a vision that these are the directions in which we are going to go. Everyone knows about it. And we align always with the national priorities. We want to be significant in the national scene. And we have an obsession to go for self-reliance. This is part and parcel of our thinking process. You also have a democratic process for decision making, a process with a discipline. Then there is a resilience to failures. If you are doing major things, whether it is small project or major project, failures will occur. How do we come out of it? How do we learn from that? And there is a cost consciousness and public accountability. These all together with a culture of working has made the difference. And I'm sure the institutes could really get into it. Now, when we talk about what contribution that IIT or IISc can make to the space system, for example, cross-fertilization of academia and ISRO professionals are essential. It's a continuing requirement. Recently, the initiative of IIT Council and the Ministry of Education saw this new scheme for mobility of faculty members to industry R&D organization and vice versa. This is a platform available to us and we should really make use of it. And for space research or aerospace, there are several areas of interest. There has to be a process of brainstorming on what are the problems that we need to look at. We don't have an aircraft beyond LCA. If we have to make a 5th generation aircraft in this country, what are those technologies required? And it is the IIT, IISc which can help us to develop this. Same thing happens in the space research also. But I would stop with the following statement. IITs, IISc, the student and faculty require small problems for their research work. But these could be subsets of a larger national problem that we should be looking at. So look at the large picture, decompose them, and make it into small problems. And with synergy of the institutions, within the institutions and the departments, let us work together. The silos should be broken. And that is the most important thing. And if we can do that, we can do wonders. 7,500 is not a small number of the best brains in the world. And that's the contribution that we can make. Number two, you asked how they can help others. Capacity building, that is the job of these premier institutions to take up major projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for such an insightful answer to my question. And you have actually brought out some very interesting aspect. 7,500, about 7,800 faculty members and about this many research staff at ISRO, science and technology staff, almost comparable. And yet there is very little collaboration between these two. I mean, one would have probably thought that there can be much more collaboration. I was talking to a professor at MIT, and he actually said that in India, there are two parallel science streams that go hand in hand together, and science and technology streams. And there is a very little, interspersed research that happens between these two. In your opinion, in what can be the method so that more interspersed research or more collaborative research between these two organizations, these two streams can actually happen?
See, if you look at the past from the 1970s, the major IITs, IISc, and ISRO started collaboration, the sponsored research program. It went to the next level of IIT cells, which was a sigma of several small projects. But what we require is to look at the cutting edge technology. And if India has to take a position in space as comparable to the first 4 or 5, what we require is technology leadership. What we require is the self-reliance in materials, components, etc., etc., etc. Export dependence has to come down. And this can come only from the premier institutions. So we have to come hand in hand to look at larger problems. And if you look at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and Caltech, see their symbiotic relationship. If you look at US, the universities drive several programs. They are major partners in the frontier areas of space technology. We should take that role. And I'm sure that whether it is IIT, Madras or Bombay or Delhi or Kanpur or Kharagpur or IISc, they all have enough potential available for this collaboration, and we should work towards that. This is an agenda for the future. Large
Wonderful.
projects, not for small things.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Maybe Professor Bhaskar Ramamurthy, I mean, you are a doyen of research in telecommunication, so well known. And just now you talked about 5GI standard, which has been a standard, India-specific standard, and we brought out, as a standard along with ITU. So it is now adopted by ITU. But, I mean, I will now look at you as director of an IIT, IIT Madras specifically. IIT Madras itself has done a lot of very contemporary and relevant research. And telecommunication is one, but then there are many other areas where it has happened. As IIT Madrasian, as alumni of that institute, as director of this institute, as faculty of this institute, what is the recipe that you have which others can follow? Maybe you can throw some insight into what goes on in IIT Madras.
Professor Bhaskar, may I request you, Bhaskar, may I request you to be brief, and then let us conclude this session. We are already running 15-20 minutes late.
I'll actually, this is a very deep question, so I will not go into it in detail. I'll just say that there is no magic recipe. There are a few things. We had a head start in sort of doing applied work, collaborating with industry, because actually our Center for Industrial Consulting was set up even with the first head was actually a German professor, one of the German professors who set up the institute. And I helped set up the institute, and you know that Germany has been very good at this. So we had a sort of a head start in the culture. Secondly, Chennai is a good place for working with industry, so we were able to grow that. Internally, in terms of encouragement of the faculty, I think we have a reasonably good record of recognizing and rewarding faculty who do this kind of relevant work. We don't necessarily go only by the publication indices and PhD guidance and so on. We have a multi-dimensional way of assessing. And I'm not saying that we don't ask ask faculty how many papers they have published and how many students they have guided. They have to do that also, but not purely on a bean counting basis. I think we look at these other contributions. We actually encourage it. And the good news is the motivation for doing this kind of work is so high that faculty are always complaining that we don't recognize it enough. So we're always trying to see how better to evaluate, how better to assess. As I already mentioned earlier, one of our problems is that we don't have a good framework for actually assessing and excellence in these initiatives, both for rewarding as well as for recognizing, because recognition is the first step towards becoming a role model. We need to perfect that a little more. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe, in interest of time, maybe we can conclude this, and I can actually just summarize what actually transpired in this panel discussion. We actually talked about, Dr. Radhakrishnan talked about big science, deep technologies, and taking some large projects so that the real relevance and real collaborative aspects can come out between Indian researchers. Very, very interesting thing. And, one can take most fundamental societal problems we have been taking, but we still have a lot, miles to go. So there is a lot of work to do. And I think it's a very, very interesting aspect that you brought out. You also talked about, how one can actually be in top institutes of the world by doing relevant research within the country, taking some mega projects. some very insightful thinking that you gave, and how research organizations like ISRO and academic institutes can work together and bring the relevance of research, which is actually utilizable. Professor Rangarajan, I could not come back to you because of the paucity of time, but IISc Bangalore is my own alma mater. I know the kind of research that goes around in IISc Bangalore. And you actually talked about some very interesting aspects of, not compromising on the quality of researcher, taking the best quality researchers available, not only in India, but even outside, holding job fairs if need be, and such kind of things. Again, you talked about mega projects. And one very interesting aspect, you talked about creation of a mega level sophisticated instrumentation facility, maybe somewhere in the country, one or two maybe, where many researchers can go and many instruments maybe in replication may be there. Also, Professor Bhaskar Ramurthy, you actually talked about very interesting thing. You said how we can actually recognize the faculty, incentivize their research, and such kind of thing to be upfront and excellence of research, and the relevance will automatically come if you keep doing things around you. Maybe not now, maybe sometime later, the world will recognize, but then we have to look at this aspect of how quality publication can possibly be done. Maybe this is the time when our systems have matured. Maybe we should look at, is the peer review process of publishing a good method, or should it be a social, crowd-based evaluation of research? We have seen some very excellent research works in last few decades which were not published but made up quite a lot of very interesting impact all over the world, and a lot of people actually talked about it. We are all aware of this. So this particular panel discussion had been very, very useful. I take this opportunity to thank all my fellow panelists and also other members like Anil Saswade, who had been there, Rakesh Ranjan, who has been there in this entire panel discussion, VijayRaghavan, PSA, who gave very interesting insight and set the tone in the beginning, Shri Amit Khare ji, and all directors and vice chancellors and other distinguished delegates. I take this opportunity to thank everybody for you being there. Professor D.P. Agrawal, Professor D.P. Singh, Professor K.K. Agrawal, and everybody else who had been here. And thank you once again. And last but not the least, I would like to thank Abhay Jere for such a beautiful coordination. Thank you very much. Over to AICTE for the second panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Professor Moona. I would like to thank Dr. Radhakrishnan, Dr. Rangarajan, and Professor Ramamurthy. Thank you so much for this intriguing panel discussion 1. I would now like to proceed with panel 2, and the topic is building innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem. And this discussion would be moderated by none other than our own Dr. Abhay Jere. Many of you, they are aware of, he needs no introduction, but the person who initiated the innovation wave across the country in higher education system, be it Smart India Hackathon, be it establishment of institutions innovation councils, be it the ranking, that is ARIA, and many, many other programs. And from higher education, now under his guidance, the innovation cell is heading towards school education as well. So Dr. Abhay, I would like to welcome. Also, another request I would like to, with the panelists for this, panel 2, once announce your name, and I would request to on your cameras so that we can see everyone. So panelist 1, we have Mr. Deepak Bagla, MD and CEO of Invest India, the National Investment Promotion and Facilitation Agency promoted by Government of India. Mr. Bagla is also a member of several high-level government committees, including FinTech, Innovation and Infrastructure. Mr. Bagla is on the advisory board of the government $7 billion Fund of Funds for MSMEs and the investment committee for the government $1.5 billion Fund of Funds for Startups. Then we have panelist 2, Dr. Anita Gupta. She's scientist G and advisor and head NSTDB. Dr. Gupta is heading innovation and entrepreneurship in the Department of Science and Technology. She has played a pioneering role in steering the horizontal and vertical growth of innovation, entrepreneurship, and startups in the country. She has been a lead catalyst in establishing technology business incubators at institutions of academic excellence, including IITs, IIMs, NITs, and leading private universities. She has also been instrumental in carving out an umbrella initiative, Nidhi, National Initiative for Developing and Harnessing Innovations under Prime Minister's National Initiative of Startup India. Welcome, Dr. Anita. Then we have the youngest member of today's discussion, Mr. Yashraj Bhardwaj. I could see him, and Yash, if you have on your camera, I'm not able to locate.
Yash is there.
Yash is there. I saw. Yash, meanwhile, I request you to on your camera, please. Yash is a 21-year-old researcher, innovator, inventor, and a very warm-hearted young fellow who keep on motivating youngsters around him. He is a co-founder director at Zenith Viper Solutions Private Limited, co-founder and partner at Ensure Equity Partners LLP, co-founder at Petonic Infotech, co-founder at Promothus Solutions Limited, advisor at Seed Capital, NEN, TED Speaker, Karamveer Chakra 2016 awardee, Forbes 30 under 30 2018. Many more laurels at this young age for Yash. I'd like to welcome you all and would like to hand over the moderation to Dr. Abhay Jere. Dr. Jere, please.
Welcome all the panelists. Considering the paucity of time which we have, we will restrict our discussion to 40 minutes. But before getting into question and answers, I will request each of the panelists to make opening remarks. They should confine themselves to 4 minutes. And after first round of opening remarks, we will actually take up questions so that we make this discussion, panel discussion, very interesting. So I will start with Anita. So Anita, over to you. I would like to request you to highlight with us what Government of India, beyond DST, is also trying to do to ensure innovation ecosystem gets promoted and sustainably established within our institutions, within our country. So over to you, Anita.
So thank you, Dr. Jere and the entire AICT team. First, compliments to you for completing 1 year for rolling out of national education policy, and it really completely gels with the kind of mission we are targeting to make India a robust ecosystem for driving the innovations, Indian innovations, and more so aligned with the new agenda and mission of being Atmanirbhar, make for India, make for the world kind of driven mission. So let me just quickly walk you through DST has been pioneers, many of you may be knowing, in terms of rolling out first of its kind institutional programs of technology business incubator, keeping in view that institutions were known to be the seedbeds of new ideas and knowledge, and also driven by the Western experiences. We had the Science and Technology Entrepreneurs Park way back in mid of 80s, and as we speak now, this entire program and activity has seen three noticeable waves. First intention was to really convert job seekers to job generators, and it served to that purpose certain extent till 2000, when India gained a lot of prominence in terms of services taking roots. GDP, more than 55% was contributed towards the GDP. Their knowledge, how do we really translate knowledge to wealth creation? And that's how business incubation had taken roots from 2000. But as we speak, when the top leadership, our PM coins a program, Stand Up India, Startup India, way back in 2016. And there's no looking back for us, because this has completely changed the complexion, the way institutions are perceiving innovation. Institutions are giving a lot of importance to integrate the startup ecosystem within their own institutional ecosystem. How are they aligning with compliments to AICT for bringing out the ranking system, which has really made them much more, in terms of innovation and startup, has much more pronounced in the overall vision and mission of the institutions. So as we speak, 2016 was a sort of a game-changing year for our activities as well, because we have to completely chalk down and come out with the programs which aligns with the Startup India mission. And brainstorming with the institution, Nidhi is the program which we have rolled out, which is sort of a pre-incubation, building the funnel and the pipeline of future innovators and entrepreneurs. But like as Dr. Jere has highlighted, beyond DST, what is happening? So beyond DST, because DPIIT became the nodal body to foster the entire and gear up not only the central ministry, but also the states for the entire activity. So nation as a whole, there has been 3-4 pillars where the entire DPIIT, along with collaboration with the leading departments, DST as a knowledge partner, DBT, MSME, METI, all have come together to solve the key gaps in the innovation ecosystem, and how to really make the environment, the ecosystem much more enabling, be it like going in for how to simplify rules, how to register a startup, so all these interventions and the creation of knowledge repository, the hubs of innovation at various institutions has really taken a giant leap. And this is also evident from the kind of application we got since last 4 years. Earlier, we were restricted to only 10 applications for a given call, and there's a quantitative jump. It's a 10 to 15x jump in the number of applications. So that's very evident that institutions are now gearing up to mold the students, to mold the faculty, and contribute towards the ecosystem. But having said that, as we go along, a lot needs to be done to really realize the ultimate vision of India R&D innovation ecosystem, finding roots and connect with industry, as well as the global ecosystem as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Now we will go to Yashraj, if Yashraj is there. And Yashraj, what I would like to request you here is to highlight how you actually took your innovations forward and what kind of ecosystem support which you got from your school, or what you think needs to be done by the institutions so that more and more innovators are there like you, which can actually motivate the entire generation. So Yashraj, you are there?
Hello, here.
Yashraj is there. Okay, I think we have some connectivity issues with Yashraj. So we will go to Deepak Banglaji. Deepak sir, you are pioneering investments in India in terms of startups. Invest India is aggressively looking at great ideas for investing and you have a huge network of investors, sir. But if you really look at investor scenario, majority of the investments are still happening in e-commerce, logistics, and not deep tech. So in your opening address, if possible, I would like you to touch upon this aspect, that how, as education system, Ministry of Education, how we can push institutions to get into students to get into deep tech startups.
Can you see me? I don't know if my.
Yes, we can see you. You're audible. We can see you.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. And it was truly a pleasure hearing Dr. Gupta. And I was really looking forward to hearing Yash, because frankly, those are the stories we all need to learn from. But let me just step back. And by the way, the earlier session was excellent. I just wish you had not had to close it early in shortage of time, because there were some very interesting ideas being shared there. Let me give you a quick introduction of Invest India. So Invest India, by the way, is also the execution arm for Startup India. So when in 2016, January 16th of 2016, the Prime Minister launched Invest India, launched Startup India, Invest India was given the responsibility to create the entire ecosystem and to see how we can execute it across. And one of the most interesting challenges we had at that point of time was to see how do we join the dots. And essentially, I think that also resonates back with the earlier session which we had, is how we can break those silos. And it's good to see Yashraj back. So Yashraj, will be looking forward to hearing you. Yeah. But how could we join the innovators, the academia, the government, and the private sector? And in fact, this is one of the key success factors of Israel. But let me just quickly go back to tell you, the first thing which we did was to start working at the state level. With each state government, we worked individually with them to carve out a state-specific startup policy. And I think that has paid us a lot of dividends, and it had to be tailor-made. And what we also did was to bring best practices globally and happening in other states, sharing it with the states and helping them execute it. So that was the first part. And if you really look at it, we are a startup nation in many ways. It's just 2016 when the Honorable Prime Minister launched it. We're just close to about, 60 months ahead of that. Today, in over 600 districts of India, I have a registered startup. To my mind, this is one of the biggest accomplishments as we move into a new phase of growth for New India. And these are going to be the new engines of growth of New India, which is going to be a bottom-up. That's the first big part which happened to it. The second part, what the team really focused on was to try and spread the word out. You see, if you recollect, one of the opening speeches was being made when the launch happened was, how do we start working with failures? How do we celebrate failure? That was a big mindset issue. And I'm taking you back to 2016. And that's where we would see a large number of youngsters were not looking to get into something which is a high-risk venture, quote unquote, and they were looking to get into safer areas. And this, I think, significantly. That is the other thing. So we started ground level startup yatras from districts, from villages. We had these buses in which the team would travel and they would go and stop in the smaller towns and cities and explain to them what and how do you register. The third part of it was that entire mentorship and how do we get the amazing mentorship which is available across the country, tie up those knots and tie them to the mentors. In fact, we have a very good learning and development program on the Startup Hub. And I would urge everyone to look at Startup India Hub, which is in the Invest India website. It's now the world's largest startup hub with over 300,000 of them on that. And we've got bridges with 11 countries. That was also now to see how do we bring startups and best practices from there. And the last part, which we are just currently working on, was try and see how do we help them in getting a market. So, all the special provisions of government purchasing being special carve-outs being done for startups, easing the norms for recognizing a startup for making them eligible for government purchasing. And apart from that, also setting up that new fund, the fund of funds, so as to speak. And that is where we are seeing some amazing traction. One of the best learnings from me on the fund of funds is that when we have these new funds coming to looking for the funding which can be provided from this fund, the strategies which they are adopting. And the other interesting factor, and Dr. Gupta will be very happy to hear that, is that women in startup, that segment is growing by over 100%. And in fact, women-led startups or women-involved startups, chances are if 70% of them will always get access to funding. So let me just keep my closing remarks close to that, and then we can pick it up later. So let me take it back to you, Dr. Jerry, because we've got to rush. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. Now, as Yashraj has joined, I would go back to Yashraj again. Yashraj, please share with us what was your story and what was the support you got from your school and subsequently from your current organization or current educational institutes, so that it can be roadmap to other schools on how they can support good ideas and ensure that their students actually become entrepreneurs. So Yashraj, over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for having me here, and I would really like to thank everybody of you. To be honest with you, I'm really small in to comment in front of such an elite panelist and having so experienced people, but I'm just gonna share my part of it. So I'm Yashraj Bhardo this side, and I'm just quickly gonna make you guys go through about the story that I had. So I started all this research and business with my twin brother, which is Yuvraj. He happens to be my identical twins and 5 minutes elder to me, and that's what makes him my boss. And so when we started off with our journey, we used to play cricket before, and we come from very humble background. So as you know, like every middle class family has a mindset that the children should do something wherein the stability is there. So either become an IAS officer or either go for engineering or become a doctor. And I always say that parents are not always at fault, because parents will definitely think what is best for their children. And our parents thought that it's important to be financially stable, and that's why they both wanted us to leave cricket aside and focus on studies and come up with something stable profession that we can take forward for. So we both left cricket when we were, I think, around 12 years old. And because what happens is many a times when you're doing something for which you are really passionate, and I'm still very much passionate about cricket, there is an instance that happens with you that you get that feeling within your heart that, for example, if I had money, I would have been playing cricket, right? I would not have been sitting in this panel. Maybe I was joining some other sports panel, I guess, right? So that pinch, when it starts hitting you in your heart, then you become really impatient, and that's what happened with me and my brother. So we were like that, if we had finances to support ourselves, definitely we would have been doing what we were passionate about. But now, as we don't have finances available, so let's not wait for 10 more years to get a school degree and then get into the college and then do a job and then become something. Let's make money right now. So we wanted to get into business. That was definitely the intent, and fund ourselves. So we started with the research, of course, because we were very much passionate about sciences. Particularly, my brother was totally into astrophysics, that is cosmology. And it's very good to see Dr. Radhakrishnan. I was just listening to him because he has been one of the inspiration to us. So when we started this off, being in Delhi, there is a book market every Sunday morning that takes place at a place called Nai Sadak. That is where we used to go get lots of books. So we were reading, particle physics, quantum mechanics, and I think we were in our 5th standard that time. It was a great experience. Definitely, it was really difficult because if you are in 5th standard, you are reading quantum mechanics, you will definitely be full of doubts. Initially, we had to face a lot of struggle in getting our doubts cleared, because unfortunately there was nothing like National Education Policy 2020 at that time. So when I'm talking about, and there was nothing as such innovation cells existing in such a great manner. So we were always hunting for professors, spamming them on their Skypes, on their emails, and just always asking to help and just to guide us that how can we clarify our doubts. So that's how our research journey basically took place. And we were approximately, I think, 15 or 16 years old when we developed our first patent, which was in the field of biochemistry, that we were using pearl millet to purify the water and extract heavy metals out of it. So that became one of the biggest projects for us, because using that project, we licensed that patent to a couple of companies, and a lot of funds, and we generated a good capital approximately to $1 million when we were 15 that time. Using those finances, we started a professional business wherein we started hiring researchers like us in a company that we formed on my dad's name, because in India, if you're not 18, you cannot form a company technically. And then we started hiring these people, and we started telling them that, whatever research that you are doing now, that will be done for my firm. And that was basically the way we pulled off the research. And I mean, the business that we are into is comprising of two factors importantly. One is we do research and development for different state market and societies. So we develop intellectual property for them and provide them with a cutting edge performance mapping to their competitors in the market. The second thing that we do is obviously consulting in research and financial consulting as well to optimize balance sheet and etc. So that has been pretty much our business journey. And I mean, why I wrapped up my journey in like just 2 minutes, because I really wanted to speak here and actually gain a lot of knowledge about the doubts and the critical factors that have been coming to my mind from a while now. I think one thing that I really faced, and this is I'm telling you out of my small experience, and also I'm sharing with you a collective experience of the researchers that I meet on a daily basis, or the innovators on the ground I meet on a daily basis. One important factor is the trust, the lack of trust. What happens is that if we take, for example, four stakeholders in Indian market, which is academia, industry, and consumer, and the government, there is a lack of trust between four of the stakeholders. And the most neglected stakeholder in the ecosystem is consumer. So for example, if I'm in industry and I'm trying to invest a capital and generate jobs on the ground, I will definitely not conduct a survey or a routine checkup or a routine feedback mechanism with the consumer base, neither with the academia, and it's vice versa. So I happened to write a book this year, and it's by the name of Resetting the Jewel in the Crown, wherein we actually, me along with different professors from UC Berkeley, because that is where I'm a Govt fellow, we did some research in actually mapping out what is it that the ecosystem is lacking and what is it that will basically revive a ecosystem. So trust comes as a very, very important factor to drive any ecosystem, a trust between the stakeholders. So, this is one input. The second input, basically, which I want to share with you guys is that I think while designing the policy, are the amazing economists that we have, driving the policies for the country, they definitely keep budget and fiscal deficits in their mind. But the very key deficit that is usually being ignored in driving the policies is implementation deficit. I think that is something that is, and I would agree to Dr. Radhakrishnan, as he was actually, I was listening to him very carefully, and he mentioned about having accountability or on respect to the implementation. If we have
Yes, we will come to that. Yes, we will come to that. Just hold on to that thought. We will come to it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Anita, I would like to ask you here is that when we are going out, you also have large number of incubators within your education, within the educational institutes. We also go to many educational institutes. We see good ideas there, but we don't see translation of those ideas into real great products which could be marketable. Would you like to talk about it, where we are missing the bus or where the gap is?
Yeah, so I think this was a felt need, and that's how our sister department DSIR came with a program like PRISM way back, but unfortunately it got derailed. And when we were having a brainstorming session, like what are the various missing links in the entire innovation value chain, this was a real felt need, because although innovations and beyond ideation stage, if an innovator wants to translate the idea into a prototype or come out with a minimum viable product, there was absolutely funding gap in the entire ecosystem. And that's how when we were came out with the Nidhi program, and the first program which we coined was the Prayas program, which really attempts to give the funding in a grant mode to enable an innovator and any individual to translate into a working prototype. And that's how this has recently we took a survey of the recipients of this program. And although by numbers and the sheer quantum of the funds being provided under Prayas program are very limited given the size of India, but nonetheless it has really worked well because 400 innovators were recipient and 70% could translate into startups, which are the products are now seeing the light of the day. So given that sample size, if such a program could be really successful from any Government of India program standards, I think this needs to be really scaled up. And that's how we have tweaked our incubation program and come out with a new program wherein like we are attempting to set up, give the infrastructure of a fab lab where innovators are given all sort of facilities, equipments for translation of their idea into a prototype. And that is the first basic step, I think, in all academic institutions. I believe AICT has also launched some Idea Lab or they've come out with these programs. And I think these two programs are really attempting to address this need of how do we really, this is the one side of the spectrum, other side, like how these kind of innovators are connected to market because many of the products do not see the light of the day. So this has to be really amplified with the active real market insights. That means such innovators need to be linked up and engaged with the good mentorship program because one aspect is how receptive these products are in the market in terms of the competitor landscape, how much in terms of the three critical features of an innovation: affordability, accessibility, and availability. How these three A's are being attempted at that particular. So it has to be examined from the products which are already available in the market. So, and real market players have to be engaged. So incubation or innovation programs needs to be linked up with the real set of people who can give real market insights. And in terms of initial funding, DST comes only at for the initial 2-3 years of their journey. Beyond that, it is really we need to re-energize. So in a way, we have like product showcase. How do we really make innovation showcase so that there could be other avenues? Now that avenues needs to be really strengthened and integrated in our ecosystem.
Bagla sir, I would like to take Anita's thought forward. As we see, when we are looking at even investment community also, majority of the investment community, when they are looking for really good ideas, they would go to our premier institutions like IITs or NITs or IISc Bangalore. But there are large number of really equally good ideas which are there in our tier 2, tier 3 institutions because out-of-box thinking can come from anywhere. Now, what kind of ecosystem interventions we should do to ensure that ideas from these tier 2, tier 3 organizations, which are really good, could be logically taken forward in terms of investment?
Rahul,
unmute रखो.
Bagla ji, just look at.
We cannot hear you.
Not audible, sir. सबको
ओके करना है
वो शायद वो नहीं कर पा रहे हैं.
Go to Yash.
Okay. I think
I couldn't unmute myself. It was not allowing me.
Yeah.
Good question, Dr. And let me just get back to that. So one, we start with, new program, Agni, AGNII, under the Principal Scientific Advisor, which is being executed by Invest India again. It's the accelerated growth of new India innovation. We are picking up innovations which are across the country, not just in the premier institutions. We're doing roundtables and fast tracking them to commercialization. So we are going sector by sector, we are going topic by topic, and every day there are roundtables and connections with the industry which are happening. That's the first part to it. The second part which we did is in every state government, there are multiple pockets of funding, and even in the central government, in fact, now we are also going through incubators and we are giving them funds to support proof of concept projects of startups. And it's happening across the state governments, it's happening across the government of India. And like we had Dr. Gupta in her department is also doing it, and several other departments are creating funding these proof of concept projects which are happening. The third, on the private side, what we are doing, and coming to your question on that one, Dr. Jayare, every day or every week, there will be a challenge statement which is being led out on the Startup India platform. In fact, we've run over 200 challenges. And these challenge statements are, for example, it's the first one we did was Uber from the US. They gave 5 challenge statements. It was open to every startup in the country. We had over 20,000 applicants at that time. They picked up a few of them. They were taken to the US, taken well care of, etc. So what we have is we have corporates which are running these challenge statements. And that is where what I'm seeing a large number of my startups from tier 2, tier 3 cities coming into it. I mean, it was so heartwarming to hear Yashraj and you. Frankly, these are the stories of new. And in that funding, what we are seeing, close to 50% of the startup challenges which are running are getting tier 2, 3 solution providers who are getting funding on that. Dr. Jain, you'd asked me a question earlier that it's only which are getting funding. And the sectors you would fintech, enterprise, health, logistics. But let me tell you now the upcoming sectors, a lot of etc., which includes deep science, but some are very interesting. Animation, nanotech. This one you will never guess, Dr. Jayare. Pets and animals, non-renewable energy, safety, computer vision, and this one again you will never guess, Dr. Jayare. Art and photography, chemicals, and a new one which is now picking up a lot of interest, event management, architecture and design. We have a large number of these new sectors which are coming up. And you've seen Nykaa, which is now just going to be opening up with its IPO. Yashraj, you would know about that. That takes you into fashion, pets, household services. All these sectors are now getting funding. Why is that happening? We now have funded through our 10,000 crore fund of funds on startup. We've already funded about 200 odd venture capital funds, which means that every time we fund them, they have to do a multiplication of 3 to 5 in putting their investment. All of them are now looking at special niches to start their fundings. A lot is now happening on the agrotech side, for example. And a large number of these funds are focusing now on rural India and the tier 3 cities for accessing their deals. So what has happened is, let me add to, and do I have a minute, Dr. Jayare, to share one more thought with you?
Yeah.
I was in a platform and I shared it with a 19-year-old boy, Sitamhari in Bihar. This was a global platform which was being run by the UN where we were talking. And this young gentleman like Yashraj and Yuvraj, after he graduated and finished his master's, he did not join the government. He did not look for a corporate job. He started a small startup, which was to help startups in and around his village to get them mentorship, to get them market globally and locally. And he has already raised close to 30 crores for them. This is now becoming a movement. Please remember, when we compare ourselves to the US, they started their startups journey in sometime in the 50s. Israel started it, And now we are number 3 in the world in number of unicorns, number 2 in the world in number of startups, and number 1 in the world in new startups adding every day. We are ahead of Israel. Let me give you an example. The first 10,000 startups.
Bagla sir,
Last point.
I just would like.
Go
ahead.
Out of the 50,000 odd registered startups with the government, the first 10,000 took us 808 days. The fifth 10,000 took us only 180 days. And these are all coming across the geography and across sectoral diversification. Back to you. Thank you.
But Bagla sir, I would like to ask here that whether majority of Indian investors are keen on investing in Me Too kind of a startups, or now they are ready to take risk, especially long-term risk. For example, if you look at startups in biological sector or biomedical sector or biosimilars, the incubation period is pretty large, or it's long. So are our investors now ready to take such kind of risk, or we are still pursuing more of e-commerce and logistics, those kind of startups?
So what happens, Dr. Jere, when we look at the investor community, it's not a homogeneous community. There are different verticals of investors. There are investors which are looking at only 3 years, there are investors which are looking at 10 years, then there are investors which are looking at sectoral diversification or sectoral focus. What is happening now in the first phase of growth of innovation and startup? Every time you will have the first easy cherry pickers which will come in, and they will pick up what is the flavor of the month. So if you had the flavor of the month, which was e-commerce, they'll pick that up and go ahead with it. What we are witnessing as this country matures in its system, you start getting other investors which have far more well specified investment horizons. And now we are starting to see, so now, for example, we have funded VCs which are only deep science and deep tech funds, only that. I've had about 10 of those funds which we have just funded, which were only deep science funds. They said that is all what they will do. Now, the moment you start this movement coming in, that is when you will start seeing funding going to these longer term gestation points. And then obviously, a lot of them getting into the research and development side where there's a high risk element with a very high multiplier on the success side of it. So that movement has started. Back to you.
So, Yashraj, I will take this thought forward about the investment community, about ease of doing business, because you have now businesses spread across 3-4 countries. What is your experience in terms of this investment as well as ease of doing business?
Sir, I think if you talk about, ease of doing business, I'm going to address both these points separately. That is where I feel that India is really coming up really well and is improving with a great rate of progression there, because the ease of business has come up really well. Right now, if you talk about if I'm a startup or I'm a company and I want to expand my footprints to public sector, previously that used to be people used to think that it's never possible, and your board will just say no to it. But now by having these single windows at every ministry or even state governments, it has made really easy for companies and startups to interact with the public sector and talk to them and share concerns and share feedback. And I think the programs like these really give a good space to the companies, the private sector firms, to come up with their problems and to actually speak that this is something that I need to survive myself in. And I really appreciate that part. Now, if we can you come out about the next point that you shared with me? What was the next to ease of doing business?
Investment. I was talking about investment.
Now, if I talk about investment,
investors' mindset.
Yeah, so investors' mindset, that is something that has to be evolved in a market like India, because what is happening is that people are too transactional still. For example, if an investor, as you rightly asked one question, that if there is a startup which has a incubation period of, let's say, 2 years, but it's very difficult to find investors on the ground who are angel or seed capital investors who will have that much patience to keep the pace for 2 years. It is very difficult. So I think we need really lots of initiatives about spreading that awareness, spreading that the success stories of the amazing returns that people have generated while having great amount of patience amongst the crowd of angel and seed capital investors, because that is the base. So if we talk about investments from bridge fund to the series round, it is pretty much big, and it comes to the company which is already in the flow. But the most critical investment that comes to anybody is angel or a seed capital, and that is where lots of patience, that is where the risk is the highest, that is where there has to be a perseverance in both the parties. So I think there is a very important need of that holistic ecosystem for this particular critical area, to spread that awareness or to share more and more success stories so that people start developing that patience.
Thank you. It is a very interesting discussion which is going on. You, Deepak ji, Anita ji are really giving some great insights. I think our viewers would like to actually know more, but considering the paucity of time, I think we have to cut down this discussion. We will again meet some other time on some other forum to take this discussion forward. So thank you very much. Mohit, over to you.
If you permit me, I wanted to highlight one point.
Yeah, go ahead, Anita.
Just final point in terms of the investment. I do see that there is a lack of investment, particularly in the deep tech and deep science area. We are losing out a couple of the incubated startups where they reach out to Silicon Valley or Singapore route they take because there's no investment available beyond a certain limit, particularly in the cyber security domain, drone related startups. So we have to think out we have to really come out with a new plans and sensitize investors. We need to retain them in India as well. So that is one. And another aspect of how do we reach out to tier 2, tier 3 kind of startups, spot them and nurture them. There are set of angel level investors who are only targeting tier 2, tier 3. So we need to really bring them up. And the one policy of UP government which needs to be lauded, needs to be scaled up, one district, one product. So institutions should come out with not only the academic excellence, the students like Yash, who have really become a new role model. Each institute should try to identify and recognize them. I think this will really go a long way in building up the culture we want to build up and celebrate them. Need to celebrate these kind of new icons. Thank you.
As I said, Anita, we have too much to discuss, very interesting topic, and we have really great panel. But yes, the points which you have raised are very important. Let's work on them offline, and let's explore how we can come up with something more concrete to make these interventions. So thank you very much. Over to Mohit for taking, for going for the third panel discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Jere. Thank you, Mr. Deepak Bagla, Dr. Anita Gupta, and Yash. Again, a wonderful discussion and a topic which I believe I always aspire for, breathe in, breathe out. Having this, now I would like to move on to our panel 3 discussion, which would be moderated by Professor K.K. Agarwal, a stalwart. Professor Agarwal is currently the chairman of National Board of Accreditation. After a distinguished service of 27 years at NIT Kurukshetra, Professor Agarwal served as Pro Vice Chancellor Guru Jambheshwar University, Hisar, and then as Founder Vice Chancellor of GGS IP University, Delhi. He has been President of the Institution of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineers, IETE, President, Computer Society of India, and President of Southeast Asia Regional Computer Confederation. He has been widely consulted by the industry, most notable being his contribution towards the reliability analysis for PSLV, Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. Then we have our panelist 1, Professor V. Ram Gopal Rao, Director, IIT Delhi. Before joining IIT Delhi as the Director in April 2016, Dr. Rao served as a P.K. Kelkar Chair Professor for Nanotechnology in the Department of Electrical Engineering and as the Chief Investigator for the Center of Excellence in Nanoelectronics project at IIT Bombay. Dr. Rao has over 475 research publications in the area of nanoscale devices and nanoelectronics, and is an inventor on 48 patents and patent applications, which include 18 issued US patents. Our panelist two, Mr. Ashwin Fernandez. He is currently the Regional Director, Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia at QS. Ashwin is responsible for working with institutions in Middle East, North Africa, and India, and closely working with governmental and public agencies in these regions. He is currently pursuing his PhD on university ranking and reputation. Then our third panelist, Professor Dr. C. Rajkumar. Professor Rajkumar, a Rhodes Scholar, is the founding Vice Chancellor of O.P. Jindal Global University. He was appointed as the Vice Chancellor at the age of 34 in 2009 when the university was established. JGU is one of only 20 universities in India and only known STEM university which has been declared as an Institute of Eminence by the Government of India. Professor Kumar is an accomplished legal scholar and works in the field of human rights and development, comparative constitutional law, terrorism and national security, corruption and governance, law and disaster management, legal education and higher education. I'd like to welcome all the panelists and request our moderator, Professor K.K. Agrawal. Sir, floor is all yours. I would like to welcome you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for introducing the panels. And let me on my behalf, first of all, congratulate the Ministry for organizing this very important session on research, innovation, and ranking, and also give us an opportunity to be a part of this national endeavor. When I was contacted for this session, research, innovation, and ranking, I just was wondering the connection between these three very important terms, research, innovation, and ranking. And I could feel that it has been planned because ranking today, particularly when we talk about global ranking perspectives in this session, is heavily dependent on research and innovation. Without the essential elements of good research and good innovation, good global ranking is just out of bounds. So therefore, connecting the three has been very important, and I am grateful to the Ministry for this session. And my job has become much easier when I look at the three wonderful panelists in this session who have very deep insights into the subject. When I talk about national education policy, whose 1 year we are celebrating these days, one has to really look for that the policy has very heavily emphasized on research and innovation. For the first time, we have conceived the concept of a National Research Foundation, which will definitely give a boost to the research and by avoiding multiplication, replication, give us much better research output in the country. Innovation and creativity has been emphasized in the policy in a very big way, which was required. And finally, quality has been the focus in the policy all through, because we have strongly realized while quantity in a country like India cannot be forgotten, will have to be emphasized. That is why we have talked about GER of 50% or so on and so forth, because in a massive country like this, quantity will have to be focused. But nonetheless, in addition, we have come to the fact that the quality will have to stay, will have to come in. And very strong line in our policy guideline is accreditation will be the new norm of regulation, meaning thereby that the institution in higher education will be allowed to stand only and only if they are accredited. So that gives a very, very strong message to quality education, which indirectly implies accreditations and rankings, which will become a part of the whole gamut of higher education. We also talk about in the policy about global citizen, And therefore, as the dimensions of internationalization of higher education and facilitating the universities to set up campuses in India, while at the same time talking about Study in India program, meaning thereby that the bridge between India and the world is being contemplated in a very strong manner. Finally, friends, we have also tried to weave a balance, perfect balance between Indian value system, heritage, culture, our all Indian languages, and at the same time, we have given equal emphasis to global competitiveness, which has been appreciated and is planned to be respected in a big way. In this light, ranking, particularly international rankings, do assume an unprecedented importance, and hence this session. I was partially through the first two sessions, which have built the background for innovation, entrepreneurship, and excellence and relevant research, which will help us to carry forward in global rankings. Well, friends, I have been following global rankings for quite some time, and also National Institute ranking framework, which we started in India about half a dozen years ago, and has been reasonably well accepted in the country. Let me right at the outset say, whatever we may do in the rankings, some degree of subjectivity in the rankings is a part of the game of the ranking. Because how much weightage to each parameter, probably there has been no foolproof mechanism to do that. And therefore, some degree of subjectivity has to be a part of the ranking system. But as we build along, for example, I've seen NRF in 6 years, we have come to a level of acceptability of a very high order of magnitude. But the subject of it's a subject of curiosity and discussion, that how do we strike a balance between perception and actual quality, and thereby ranking. During the last Tokyo Olympics, I read a beautiful piece. He says a psychologist analyzed the mindset of the medalists, and he says, I found silver medalists slightly depressed, but bronze medalists elated. Now, on face of it, it looks like a very dangerous and wrong statement. But when I went a little deeper into the write-up of that psychologist, he says you get the silver medalist just after losing the game, and you get the bronze medal just after winning the game. And that makes the mind state very different, but that does not really mean ultimately it will have an impact on the ranking. Why I am trying to say this is perception, instantaneous perception, long-term perception will have a bearing on all these things, and that cannot be just a subject of criticism. It has to be a subject of long-term debate. In India, we talk about world-class universities, like most of the countries in the world do that, which is a very long-term planning. And at the same time, we want to have very short-term ranking targets. Now, for a university to strike a balance between short-term targets and long-term targets itself is a very challenging game to play. And therefore, I believe that this session will give us some interesting insights for the universities in this country to take a path on. And I'm so happy and grateful that the three panelists which we have not only fair knowledge of this area, they have immersed themselves in area and worked in this area and have very important feelings to share with us. So without taking much time, and all of these three panelists have been already introduced in a brief manner, because to introduce these panelists fully is impossible in a 40-minute session. So I'll straight away go to the panelists, and in the first round, I'll just ask each one of you to make about 5 minutes brief comments about the topic, and then we'll go to some specific questions. So I have great pleasure in inviting Professor V. Ramgopal Rao, the first panelist of this session, who is Director IIT Delhi, one of our best ranked institution, obviously, and has his own views, strong views about perception of global rankings. So, Professor V. Ram Gopala Rao, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. Thanks a lot. I'm happy to be on this panel. If you look at rankings, let me, just since there are many people who are not really aware of what these international rankings are and on what parameters they really rank the institutions. So let me give a brief primer on rankings. There are 6 parameters. If you look at the QS, which is probably the most popular ranking in the country, most of us are participating in that. The first one is the academic reputation. The second is the employer reputation. So these reputation parameters are 50% of the QS ranking methodology. And on these 2 parameters, in an institution like IIT Delhi, for example, in academic reputation, we score 45 out of 100. On employer reputation, we score 70 out of 100. But this is also, these are the 2 parameters where there is a lot of regional bias, and QS is aware of all the complaints that both Ministry of Education and our individual institutions are making. But I would also think, these are also the least transparent of all the parameters right now. I think something needs to happen there to improve the regional bias as well as the transparency. But I think this is also some place where we have scope to improve further, and that is where improved social media presence, visibility in the society for the work that we are doing, even an international kind of a campaign like the Incredible India campaign. In one of the last IIT Council meetings, we discussed something like that, where for all institutions in India together, at least for the IOE institutions, if the country can launch an international campaign on study in India sort of a thing, highlighting the great things that are happening in our institutions, that can change the perception part of it. But that is something which we need to do better, and we can do better, and things are getting better. We're actually improving our perception part of it year after year. The third parameter is the citations per faculty. This is probably one of the very subject or quantitative kind of a metric, a bibliometric kind of a metric that QS uses. They use the Elsevier, the Scopus kind of a data, which is good, and their being comprehensive will help. IIT Delhi, for example, a couple of years ago was scoring above 90 marks out of 100 on the citations per faculty. But in the last 4 years, we recruited 200 new faculty. So therefore, our denominator has gone up. The numerator hasn't increased significantly because these people will take time to come into the system and become productive in the system. So that is taking a bit of a time, but there again, we have a huge scope to improve. I mean, some of our top institutions can be in the 90 to 100 range. IASC has already shown 100 out of 100. IIT Delhi, will be in the 90 range in a year or 2 time frame. I think there we have a scope to improve. But here again, being comprehensive will help. IITs are very narrowly focused on engineering, so that creates a problem for us in the citations per faculty, because engineers are not good at citing each other's work. Even our most reputed journals will have impact factors of 2, 3 kind of a thing, while some of these medical journals will have 25, 30 kind of a thing. So therefore, I think we need to become comprehensive, and I am also very happy that the new education policy is also pushing us in that direction, and which is a good sign. At IIT Delhi, we are doing many things in that direction. The fourth parameter is the faculty-student ratio, and here IITs are again not doing very well because we have been increasing students for whatever reason it is. The last increase was because of the EWS quota. We added 2,500 additional students in the last 2 to 3 years. So we have taken a bit of a hit, but finding IIT quality faculty is also an issue. And here again, we can improve. We are improving, and so we have a huge scope. Right now, IIT Delhi scores about 30 marks out of 100 in the faculty-student ratio. But remember, we were scoring below 10 just a few years ago. So I would expect that this also has a huge scope to improve. And the fourth thing, or the fifth thing rather, is the internationalization. There 2 factors come into picture: the international faculty and international students. There we are doing, devastatingly bad. And IIT Delhi, for example, on international faculty,
scores 1.7 marks out of 100. On international students, 1.2 out of 100. So there we can, improve very significantly, not by just 100%, but by 1000%. I think that needs to happen in the next few years, and it's already happening. I am also very happy that even the new education policy is also talking on the same lines. The ASEAN program, which the Ministry of Education runs, and which IIT Delhi is coordinating, providing 1,000 fellowships for ASEAN students is a good step in the direction. The GYAN program, the Vajra program, the Spark program, these are all things which are happening and going in the right direction. I think it's a matter of time. I think the current rankings, I would think, are not a true reflection of what our institutions are. And I think another 3 to 5 years time frame, looking at the trends that I see right now, I think there is no reason why some of our top institutions, at least 3, I would think, can be in the top 100. I think hopefully we need to do what we are doing a little bit on a more aggressive side, but otherwise I don't think it's really going to be an issue for the institutions. Yeah, I think I will come back again maybe in the subsequent rounds. Thank you.
And I'm deferring the questions after all three of you have made the initial remarks, because I'm sure some of the questions of one will be answered by other, knowing all three of you. So I now invite Dr. Ashwin Fernandez, Regional Director, KOS, who has been in very deep into the global rankings right from beginning. So I invite him for making initial comments, please. Dr. Ashwin.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agarwal, and a warm welcome to everybody who's joining us today. Special thanks to AICTE for this invitation and to Dr. Abe for reaching out. So I think I've listened to the entire session and very interesting remarks. There is definitely no doubt that higher education in India has undergone a remarkable change in the last few years. And I think with the new education policy, we are embarking on a new paradigm shift. Basically paving way for transformational reforms in higher education to make India a global knowledge superpower. Now, congratulations on NEP actually having its first anniversary, which has opened up many opportunities to attract international students, academics, and as well as international funding. Today, I see many Indian institutions are committed to increasing their global outreach, which wasn't the case many years ago. And definitely there are substantial efforts which are made to basically improve the institutional performance, which ultimately will reflect in global rankings. In the current World University Rankings by QS, which was released 2 months ago in June, we had 35 institutions which featured in this ranking. Now, despite this number, I think there is a very important fact here that the focus should be on the latent potential which India has to do well in the global rankings. And I think the NEP places a lot of importance on the steps which it needs to take. 2 areas, I think, and I will come to the steps a bit later, is the focus on internationalization. I think Professor Ramgopal Rao has already mentioned that we don't do well in internationalization. And when I say we, I'm talking as part of India here, not as QS. We definitely need to see this as a catalyst to spur many Indian institutions to position themselves strategically and of course to cater to the needs of the global knowledge society. There is also, we've seen the growth in the students enrolling in higher education. I think it's a one-way street when we look at students going abroad versus students coming into India. So there is, I think, a lot of emphasis which the new education policy had put into place. And I think the latest Study in India initiative has seen a 145% increase in the number of students who are showing interest in India. I think we cannot, and I'll echo the sentiments of a previous panelist as well, we cannot be satisfied with the current performance. And we really need, if we want to make India a $5 trillion economy by 2025, there has to be a substantial increase in our expenditure for education from the GDP. Now, an interesting fact is if we look at the percentage of spend on education as part of the GDP, if you look at the 20 countries which we have around the world, they make up 630 plus universities out of the 1,000 universities. And we have 80 almost 100 countries represented in the World University Ranking. So the top institutions in the world are definitely coming from those economies which have a great spend on education in the GDP. So definitely that should be the way forward. And I think when we talk of Atmanirbhar Bharat, Make in India, an interesting fact, I think, which we have probably not celebrated, and this has been directly connected to reputation, is in the last year and a half, India ranks 5th in the world for COVID research. Now, that is an amazing fact. Now, compared to all the other powerhouses in the world, I think we can already see that impact of the investment I think the government's putting into, because this is current research happening. So 5th in the world is amazing. I think to ensure the Indian higher education system is ranked at best in the world, we have institutions which are going to be focusing on performance improvement. I'm not using the word rankings because rankings are the outcome of what institutions are doing. So there are 3 key areas I think which we need to focus on. First is internationalization. Second is research, and third is reputation. So in internationalization, we have to keep on increasing, or I think we need to focus on how do we get international students and faculty, perhaps not from far off, but at least starting off within the ASEAN region and in the near vicinity. Strengthening the Study in India portal, offering scholarships, and definitely easing the visa process to attract international students. Recognizing and transferring of credits from international to here and here to international could be eased under mutual twinning agreements. Encouraging, I think, immediately, at least virtually for now, student and faculty exchange programs. And that is a huge potential. It is happening at some of the key universities, but how can we trickle that down to the 2nd and 3rd tier cities would be an interesting thing to see, which will support internationalization. Organizing workshops, seminars, and conferences. We have seen mammoth amount of content coming out in COVID virtually, how we can keep that work happening in the physical environment, and also enabling Indian institutions to establish offshore campuses. I think this would be really key for us to take Indian institutions to the world. So that's the first one, is internationalization. We've talked of research, and the panelists have already made very great comments earlier. I think NEP lays a very important stress on creating stronger institutions. I would like to quote, the former president of National University of Singapore, Professor Shi, which said that it's not a zero-sum game between attracting foreign investment and nurturing local startups. We should be having the culture of developing our own startups, having incubation cells within institutions, not just for technology and sciences, but beyond that in areas which probably can also impact the community. And I think the National Research Foundation, which has been proposed in NEP, will promote and expand this beyond, and hopefully getting to at least 3% spend of our GDP towards research and innovation will be a great step towards helping improve that. Another area which we think has worked really well in many developing countries is sharing of infrastructure and capacity from the key universities in which are already ranked to the smaller ones in smaller tier cities. That will really spur the impact of research in these places. And internationalization and research are covered. The last part, which is what I think my previous panelist said, is the reputation part. How do we actually create the impact of India being a good or a great place to come and do research for postgraduate or postdoctorate? I think the fact that India was ranked 5th or is ranked 5th in COVID research is one of the areas we could capitalize on in the future. So additionally, I would say the reputation, creating engagement with social media, featuring successful alumni, featuring key faculty members, looking at international, hopefully in the future, international conferences, participation, and putting the word out there, what great things we are doing in India. And I think using our bodies which are here today, which are the Invest India and the Study in India and all those other agencies to help promote the key key things for India in the world is important. So definitely we should be looking at creating more visibility for Indian institutions and for the great work and research and internationalization. So those three areas, I will stop here because I think I've kind of exceeded my time, and I'm happy to take any questions later on. Over to you, Professor Agarwal.
Thank you so much, Ashwin, and so happy that you spoke more from Indian point of view rather than QS point of view. That will be helping a lot to Indian universities, and we look forward to it. And I have the third panelist now, Professor Rajkumar, very dynamic Vice Chancellor from Jindal Global University, who has built the university right from scratch, and today brought the university in a short span into many international reckonings, not only by the academic work, but also by the solid study of international ranking mechanisms and how to go about it and so on. So may I invite Professor Rajkumar to make the initial observations before I take up some questions depending upon the time which Abhay has for it. Professor Rajkumar, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Agarwal, and thank you for those very valuable comments by Professor Rao and Dr. Ashwin Fernandez. I want to thank the chairman of the AICTE and the Ministry of Education for actually putting together this fantastic discussion since morning. We are all engrossed in this truly amazing brainstorming session, which has thrown up a number of ideas. I'm going to be a little more candid and critical in this regard. First of all, I'm conscious of the fact that I'm the only private university institution represented in the entire program. So that's already a big burden in a country where 70% of our higher education institutions are in the private sector. 70% of students in India are studying in private higher education institutions. We need to see a much larger private sector representation in all forums and platforms. Second, I'm conscious that I'm the only person representing the entire tradition of liberal arts, humanities, social sciences among fantastic engineers and STEM discipline individuals. Again, we need to have a much stronger focus on humanities and social sciences, and we need to do that more aggressively. I want to say that I just want to quickly reflect on where we are today in terms of rankings. Barely 6 years ago, and this is very important for us to come to terms with it, because we need to recognize what we want and then we can work towards how to achieve it. Barely 6 years ago, the larger part of Indian higher education establishment had denigrated, discredited, and denied and deprived the opportunity for international rankings to play any meaningful role in Indian higher education. There were outrageous arguments made to the extent that this was some global conspiracy to undermine Indian higher education institutions, to the fact that this methodology was somehow uniquely discriminatory for India, and all of that. Thankfully, the Honorable President of India, the Honorable Prime Minister of India, and many other enlightened educationists, including people who are present here, some of whom have gone past that bias, prejudice against the vision of international rankings and recognize that if we want to compete internationally, we need to prepare for it. It's a bit like trying to go to Olympics and say, you know what, I have trained in different turf in India. I have different side of problems. I am prepared to compete only in those conditions, but then don't compete in the Olympics. If you want to compete in Olympics, just like our Honorable Prime Minister has decided that we want to be in the World Bank's rankings when it comes to better business conditions, then you need to be part of that framework. So we have to first stop criticizing the rankings methodology, because it's an absolutely futile exercise. We will never be able to move forward as to how we can position our universities to do better. Second, we need to seriously consider what the ranking scenario has emerged in the last 1 decade with regard to China, Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, and Taipei. Barely 10 to 15 years ago, hardly there were universities in these countries represented in the rankings. Today, you have a situation where China has occupied 7 to 8 spots in top 100 and significant in top 200. And overall in the rankings, it's overtaking every country anywhere in the world. Now, the reason this has happened is there is a political and intellectual and academic consensus surrounding rankings, and the entire effort is focused on the methodology and the processes and procedures associated with participation in the rankings. Third, we also need to recognize that how do we stop creating confusion in institutions when it comes to rankings? Today, what is happening is we have been asked to participate in NIRF, and then we also have to participate in international rankings. And then there are universities which are participating in newspaper and magazine-based rankings. Then there are subject rankings. It's absolutely important that if India needs to see its leading institutions to be in global rankings, then you need to ignore the national rankings. You need to prepare your entire focus, your capacity building exercise, your internal policy systems, your organizational and assessment of faculty research, your incentives for faculty research, your office of rankings within universities. Every aspect of institutional mechanism ought to be focusing on the participation of Indian universities in international rankings. I am by no means suggesting that every university in India, the 1,000 universities, should compete for international rankings. But if you decide that a set number of institutions should be pitched for it, then you need to provide the necessary wherewithal and not to lose sight of it and cause additional burden with numerous types of methodologies of assessment in determining how they should position for participating in international rankings. Fourth aspect, which I think is a question of how we go about this, and this is something which has resonated among everybody, we mention about international faculty and international students. Let me tell you, sir, our university has 110 full-time faculty members from 40 countries in the world. We are the only university in India, public or private, which recruits the largest number of international faculty. But I can tell you, I can share sweat, blood, and tears, how much it is difficult to recruit these people, to organize visas, to ensure FRRO registration process, to ensure the entire process of recruiting them, having them, retaining them and being part of our intellectual imagination. It is no easy task. And here I share the agony of public and private universities. The Ministry of Education needs to work very closely with the Ministry of External Affairs, with the Ministry of Home Affairs, and many other bodies to ensure that this focus on internationalization, both in terms of faculty recruitment and student admissions, receives a new impetus so that we can advance the situation. Today, what we are seeing is around the world, something dramatic is emerging. Historically, we would see 1 million plus students in North America, nearly 600 to 700,000 in UK, and many other countries, including Germany and Australia and others, would have those places. But believe it or not, China is now gone past UK and is hosting over 650,000 international students. We are barely not even reached 100,000. So we really need to change the model that we are adopting, because we have to come to one important decision. By doing the same thing again and again, we cannot expect different results. The landscape has changed. Dramatic changes are needed for us to improve on these matters, the two parameters Dr. Rao also talked about, which is international faculty and international students. Lastly, I will say that for improving reputation, we need to work together. The division between public and private needs to stop. We need to together advance the cause of Indian higher education so that data provisioning, but also participating in these surveys and recognizing each other's merit and appreciating and celebrating each other's achievement should become more as a cultural evolution of Indian higher education rather than anathema that is currently there. These are some of the thoughts I want to share with as my introductory comments, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you very much, Dr. Agarwal.
Professor Rajkumar, true to your nature for giving candid remarks, and I fully agree with you. First of all, I think you can be reminded of that in NEP, hopefully, public and private distinction is supposed to go away. We will have 3 categories of universities which does not talk about public, private, and I hope we mean it seriously. Then you have also very rightly pointed out that we cannot pitch all 1,000 universities for international ranking. That is waste of time and effort, and we have to make a filter. As a matter of fact, as Chairman National Board of Accreditation, also overseeing ranking to some extent, I do get pained at times over the data collection effort which is being done in the universities for processing accreditations, rankings, and global rankings. And I'm at times I'm wondering how much is it at the cost of teaching learning process. If that be so, I think we are becoming penny wise, pound foolish. We cannot really afford to do that. So maybe some sort of eligibility criteria, maybe loose criteria, not a very harsh criteria, that you try for accreditation first. If you come to that level, then you go for national ranking. If you come in national ranking first 200, then you try for international ranking. Something will have to be done so that everybody doesn't put in effort unnecessarily, and thereby giving a breed of academic consultants profession is a big profession which does not really add to our higher education system in any manner. I think we have to seriously think about it. I think some little times I'll have some questions. Professor Ramgopal Rao first. I think Professor Rao, first of all, we obviously recognize that the Indian institutions should excel in international rankings. You are working for this, but maybe a few sentences to enlighten the audience on this. And secondly, are the international rankings really a true reflection of excellence of our institutions as far as our national perspective is concerned?
Yeah, I think about the true whether the international rankings are a true reflection of what our institutions are. My categorical answer is no. IIT Delhi, I have served in multiple institutions all over the world, and for whatever work that our top institutions are doing, IIT Delhi should have been around 50 in the international rankings, and subject rankings could have been 20 to 25. If we are not, it's because we are not focusing enough on these rankings. We have never focused on the international parameters. There were also issues with respect to admission of students and the criteria and the examinations we conduct. Some of these were coming into play, but I think now that we know what needs to be done, I think we will reach whatever is the rightful spot for our institutions. But I'm not going to accept that our institutions are inferior. That's why they are not in the top 50 kind of a thing. I think the ranking methodologies need to improve, and even to win Olympic medals, you need to have a very strong Indian culture for sports, and the NIRF is providing that culture. I think if you are not even doing well in NIRF, I can't even believe you can be ranked top in the world. And I wouldn't even like to take that with a pinch of salt, because you can game the system and become ranked very high in international rankings. If the NIRF, where 90% of the data is all quantitative, collected through a very transparent kind of means, if you are not able to do well in NIRF, I don't take that as very seriously. If somebody is figuring in the world rankings, and I have seen many institutions appear in those international rankings 1 year, disappear the next year, because the foundations are not there. And I think in IITs, some of our top institutions, the foundation is very strong. I think it's only a matter of focusing on those metrics specifically. I think that will take a little bit of time. Internationalization is not going to happen overnight. For that, we need to change our entire even admission processes when it comes to PhD students or even faculty recruitment. I think that takes time, because we are, after all, government institutions. There are also autonomy issues. I would also think autonomy and competition need to go hand in hand. And unfortunately, that has not happened in the country. But I think with NEP now, which NEP talks about autonomy for these institutions and all that, I think, these rankings will happen. I think it's just a matter of another 3 to 5 years when our institutions, at least the top ones, will find their rightful place in the rankings. And I'm not too concerned about what is our current rank today, looking at the potential that these institutions have to go to the top 50 in a period of time.
In a way, echoing that let NIRF be the first filter and so on and so forth to see how do we go to international rankings with higher degree of success. And I'm very sure and agree with you that within a few years, we will be able to do that. It's only a question of focus. Otherwise, for many parameters of quality, our institutions are doing pretty well all over. Dr. Ashwin, this year, India has seen a 145% increase in applications from overseas students for study in India. We had 136 nations showing interest compared to only 12 last year. What could be the impact of this in global rankings? And do institutions really need to do anything more to make the best use of this potential? Your views, Dr. Ashwin.
Thank you so much, Mr. Agarwal. I think it was very clear that there is interest, especially from the Indian diaspora overseas, to study in India. The interest was very clear in the Study in India test, which was done in late July. Now, of course, if and when we get these international students coming to India, we ease the process of visas. We also look at diversifying the number of countries being represented. This eventually not just impact the top institutions in India, but also the private and other institutions which are attracting international students. So I think this would hopefully in the next few years increase and support Indian institutions to get respect and perhaps be ranked better. On a broader level, when we talk about rankings and how Indian institutions can perhaps do better, I think there's a very important fact which Professor Rajkumar mentioned earlier is if you want to, and I used to use the analogy of soccer, but now it's the season of Olympics. So I will mention Olympics again. If we want to compete globally, we have to look at the global parameters. Now, we can complain about the international indicators for sure. There's a 10% total weightage, but there is a 90% weightage there, which is untapped potential for Indian institutions. Now, while we can keep this 10% aside, my focus for Indian institutions would be how do we capitalize on the 90% which is there. Now, congratulations to NIRF for actually setting the kind of the mood in the country for people to submit data, have the willingness to participate in rankings. But definitely NRF is at the Indian level. There are certain benchmarks put inside which are great inside, but when we compete globally, there are no benchmarks in the rankings. We don't say you have to have a 10:1 faculty student ratio or a 10:1 citation impact. We allow it to the actual relativity in the market. Now, we can complain and say that, well, these rankings are not reflective. And I think I'm also not saying the rankings are perfect. At QS, we say that, George Box, the former late statistician, said, essentially all models are wrong, but some are useful. So we look at rankings as a useful model. We listen to feedback. And while it might not be God's word, I think it is a useful indication of where institutions are progressing. One of the things which Indian institutions should do more is reflect on the data and on the results every year. And I think if that is reflected upon, there's a clear, all the data is not put out publicly, of course, because you don't want people to game the system. But there is data available in each institution's fact file. There's data available in certain tools online, which is available free to institutions. How can you use the tools and have an internal office which actually analyzes this. I know many institutions, especially private ones, which have an office of rankings, benchmarking, and I think the co-panelist here, Professor Raj at OP General, I think even IIT Delhi has a dedicated person. How they could use this as a dedicated office to start analyzing and benchmarking, because once you know where the benchmarks are, you can then set the targets of where do you want to go. So that's most important, I think so, and eventually start looking at who are the peers in the region you're targeting against. We've seen how China has progressed. There is great potential, I think, for India if we are starting this journey with NEP, and how NEP is going to foster the growth of institutions. Again, I'm not saying we have to improve in global ranking, but we have to understand what are the international benchmarks and how do we position the institution to do better, to have better performance improvement. So ultimately, it reflects in the global rankings.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think you have touched the right single most point of data. And I think I see Professor Sarvudaya here, and we are struggling for quite some time to see how can we have good, fair data collection, which will help us in many endeavors, including ranking. Thank you so much. And finally, Professor Rajkumar, I think you have made some very important observations, but still I like to ask you one question at least. What should the regulatory bodies and the Ministry of Education do to develop a stronger focus on global rankings and international benchmarking of universities? And of course, how the universities internally work, but external mechanism will also have to be strengthened in that direction. So if you can say a few words on that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Agarwal. I think I must say that the regulatory bodies are already tuned up to this type of recognition. For example, if you look at the graded autonomy policy, they used an accreditation principle and ended up giving, let's say, more autonomy to a selected set of institutions on some principle. We need to take that, and in the Institute of Eminence policy, a similar framework was adopted and they were given. In fact, the rankings have been given a status in the IOE. It's a Gazette notification which has formally recognized and put an aspiration, a sense of responsibility on the IOEs that within the next decade or so, the IOEs are expected to come up to a certain level in those rankings. So this has already happened to some extent. The next step is we need to recognize institutional differences and distinctions when it comes to their own aspirations to be part of international rankings. We cannot expect them to be overburdened with multiple rankings as aspirations and then end up being conflicted when it comes to having a different type of approach towards rankings. Second, I think one aspect is this kind of a conversation that we're having today becomes important because more and more institutions become sensitive about their aspirations and start actually doing things. And I do believe that both QS and THE should be more actively involved in India. They should be invited to forums as well as engage with the highest levels of the ministry and the regulatory bodies to understand the methodology surrounding these rankings and how institutions can build internal capacities for advancing that. I also think that at least from the standpoint of public institutions, more incentive structures can be created within the ministry as well as the educational regulatory bodies. After all, IOE does provided that. One of the things that IOE did is to provide substantial financial resources for the IOEs, including public IOEs, although private IOEs were not given financial resources. Lastly, I would say this aspect should be taken to the institution as well. Institutions, the point about data collection, which you mentioned, is so important because many a time multiple emails are sent from UGC, from ministry, from other bodies asking for information at various points of time in an academic year. An enormous amount of time and resources are being spent. We really need to have a better way of collecting data, storing data, retrieving data, correcting data, having data feedback. This should become a body in which all institutional data is easily available and accessible. And in this regard, one of the things that the ministry can do, and this is something which could be easily done, is at the time of the survey that is being administered, it will be a good idea for people to be encouraged to participate in it. One of the challenges that we have seen is that there has been very poor participation among Indian institutions in the rankings when it comes to the data. And I must say that all of us can provide names, all the institutions which are being asked, we can provide names and information to participate in the survey. We will never know as to who the survey is sent, but if the survey does come, people should participate so that ultimately, all Indian universities are positioned better when it comes to rankings in the international context. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Rajkumar. You say it's easy to collect data. I think myself and Professor Sahasrabudhe have struggled for quite some years, and we have not found it very easy. Let us see that good wishes from all of you and good cooperation helps us this system, because this is one step which will reduce a lot of unproductive work from all the institutions, and we must pull full weight to this. Thank you so much for all the three great panelists. As a matter of fact, I could go over the whole day, given the knowledge base of all these three and the list of questions I have, but time requires us to stop. I'll just make one or two very small observations for half a minute. First is, in the global rankings particularly, we have seen diversity being given quite a good weightage, and understandably so. We do feel that the diversity in higher education means a lot, but diversity only between the boundaries of the nation? Is that the only diversity? Cultural diversity, regional diversity, even language diversity, all these diversities have much more abundant in India, but going by only one diversity between the national boundaries, I have invariably said that probably the advantage of diversity, if we want to see the real sense of diversity between many states in India, is much higher than many countries abroad amongst themselves. So somewhere probably re-look at the diversity in its broader meaning, maybe something helpful. And I was reading a paper from some of the European universities, and how the parameters and the ranking itself is a very global, very dynamic phenomena as to change. Some of the universities have decided that they will no longer give emphasis to impact factor, which we have worshipped for last 2 decades, because they said that overemphasis on impact factor is anti-team working and is anti-open science. And team working is very important. Open science is very important. So is impact factor really helping in that? Their answer is no. They are trying to work on this. They do know that in this process they are losing on global rankings. So sometimes things are different perceptions, and we'll have to be dynamic in this. I think I'll have to stop here and thank our panelists once again, and thank AICT and the ministry for organizing this session, and hand over to Dr. Abhay Jire for continuing with the validity session. Thank you very much once again. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Professor K.K. Agarwal and the other panelists, Professor Rao, Dr. Ashwin Fernandez, and Professor Rajkumar. And it was really an interesting discussion, and it was intriguing to understand the perspective of all the panelists on rankings and where are we, what is the way forward, and what has to be done. Once again, thank you very much. Now, I'd like to invite Professor Anil Sahasrabudhe, the torchbearer, the person who is guiding, for his concluding remarks. Professor successful there. Sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we have already crossed the limits by half an hour already. Today is the last of the 8 webinars which were held after the celebration of 1 year of completion of the new national education policy being announced on 29th of July 2020. On 29th of July 2021, Honorable Prime Minister again addressed, and we are in the series of seminars, webinars, starting with school education to higher education to now today, research, innovation and ranking. Today itself, we had 3 panels, each one moderated by an eminent person with, in each panel, 3 eminent people who spoke. So there are 12 people who contributed, and in the inaugural session, 5 of them were contributors, and 17 people, what they spoke, concluding it in about 5 minutes' time is the biggest challenge. And I would like to attempt at some of the facilities which people have said. First and foremost, our Honorable Minister, Rajkumar Ranjan Singh, whose name coincides with the last speaker of the day, that is another Rajkumar of the global university, that is O.P. Jindal University. I think one of the most important things he talked about was culture of curiosity, breathing excellence, 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 excellence. He used that 3 times. All the institutions have to think about excellence as the only motto, nothing else. Growth of this entire ecosystem to fire innovation in our country, becoming engine of growth, not just for India, for the world. I think these are very concrete words which the Honorable Minister spoke, and also, of course, connecting it with the kind of work that we have been doing during the COVID crisis and also becoming Atmanirbhar Bharat. I should compliment our entire innovation cell in AICT, funded, supported by us, but it's a ministry's division which has been spearheading this particular movement of innovation in our country. And I'm very happy that during the pandemic period, we had 5 hackathons held, which are special. Other than Smart India Hackathon, we had Samadhan, we had Ideathon, we did have hackathon which was exclusively meant for developing toys, and drug discovery hackathon is ongoing. And apart from that, ASEAN level hackathon was also held during this period. So that means all of that, what is required to be done, is going on. And therefore, the success stories which were given by our eminent speakers in different domains, whether it is in terms of research, in terms of innovation, in terms of rankings, which are improving constantly over the years, that is music to the ears. But everything is not done. Still there is a long way to go. And that is what is very, very important. We have to reach the zenith. In ensuring excellence and research in India, the first one, Dr. Radhakrishnan, with the elaborate experience of space science, the culture of the entire structure of ISRO itself, that is that of collaboration, that of teamwork, which is so significant and important. Without that, one cannot progress. And the last speaker also spoke about, the reason why our rankings are not improving is because we are not working collaboratively. I think collaboration between institutions, within the institution, multidisciplinary people working together, I think these are very, very important challenges which we have to address. Dr. Radhakrishnan also talked about not just improving in our rankings and systems, but how we can be effective in solving the problems of the common man. It's a common man on the street. That's how societal importance, the formidable problems that we face, and how do we find solutions. And one of the answers given by the director of IISc Bangalore, Professor Rangarajan, was about multidisciplinarity and collaboration. He often said that we do get funding for infrastructure, but how do we also require to get funding for our support staff, their salaries, maintenance of the equipment which we have bought? Otherwise, the equipment will remain like a elephant in the room, actually. So I think that is very, very significant suggestion which has come. Bhaskar Ramamurthy, of course, talked about relevant research that IIT Madras has been doing. And there are many other examples from different institutions about helping society in different ways. Relevant research right from villagers to the city dwellers. Transportation problem to the water problem, sanitation problem. I think these are the challenges which we need to address. That was the sum and substance of the first, of the set of series of, our panel discussions. The second one was about building innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem, led by Dr. Abhay Jere. We had Dr. Anita Gupta, Dr. Deepak Bagla, and a young Mr. Yashraj, who at the age of 13 started innovative journey and had patent in his name along with his brother at the age of 13, 14. And then several companies being floated on one side, to Dr. Deepak Bagla of Invest India, where how ecosystem is being supported by the government on one side, and how private players are also required, whether it is angel supporters or whether it is different types of funds which are required to be created, not only of the government, but by the private sector to support the system of innovation and entrepreneurship. One of the significant things which we should also remember is, if we want to really create a culture of innovation, it should start from the school. And school education and our ministry's innovation cell are working together for bringing up about more than 20,000 ambassadors from school teachers who are going to drive this. And also not only that, how tinkering labs or all variety of activities that are happening in the country in order to support innovation at the grounds level. Second part is examination reforms. We have to move away from our system of rote learning type of examination system, and how innovatively questions are asked and innovative answers are respected. I think these are very, very significant and important transformational changes that are required, and NEP provides all the possible opportunities. The startup hub with about 300,000 people who are supporting this particular initiative in India itself, and third largest ecosystem of the startups on one side. On the other side, number of startups that are starting per day or per year, India is the highest. I think we have a grand opportunity before us to solve the problems and then go ahead. AICT itself has a very interesting program of women-led tech startups being supported to go to Canada every year, 10 of them, and 10 of them are invited from there. So this kind of exchange for even innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem does support and does help. The last one, strategy for higher education institutions in excelling in global rankings. Of course, Rajkumar very eloquently said that this is uniquely discriminatory in terms of global rankings. But we must first focus on our own national institutional ranking framework if you are to graduate. It is not that all the parameters are completely different. I'll slightly beg to differ with you on this count, that unless we graduate to a particular level, we cannot aspire to be in the global top 100. And therefore, this is the first step in that direction. And most of the parameters are similar. The only parameter where we get hit is the internationalization, especially foreign faculty being available, foreign students in large numbers. But a university like OP Jindal with so many countries, students being there, with so many faculty being there, still we are not able to make marks. So there are other characteristics also which have to be looked into. So let us work together, private or public, doesn't matter. New education policy does not distinguish between public and private. And the regulatory framework that is going to emerge as part of the policy is likely to further support, give fillip to this idea of supporting, including private sector universities and colleges through national research funding, NRF. And therefore, the visibility, the perception is already improving through our GAN and Spark. These are very interesting programs which ministry started much before the policy came into existence. So now that the policy is there, we have gone through the journey of 1 year. I'm sure in the next year, we should have a clear roadmap, which based on all the ideas that have been given by eminent 14, 15 people today itself, and in the 8 webinars, another 15 multiplied by 8, more than 100 odd people. I think we will take it forward and give a commitment to the nation, to the Prime Minister, that certainly in the next 1 year, we would be in a position to achieve the targets that are set for us. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, sir, for the concluding remarks. I would now like to invite Professor Rajiv Kumar, Member Secretary ICTE, for a vote of thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mohit. Honorable Chairman has already covered all the concluding with his concluding remarks. So, formal vote of thanks to all panelists, Dr. K. Radhakrishnan, Professor Govindan Rangarajan, Professor Bhaskar Ramamurthy, Professor Mr. Deepak, Dr. Anita Gupta, Mr. Yashraj, Professor Ram Gopal, Ashwin Fernandez, Professor Rajkumar. all the eminent speakers, they spoke and they deliberated on issues allotted to them. And definitely the deliberations will help the government in implementing the national new education policy. I will also like to thank moderator of the programs, Professor Rajat Mona, Dr. Abhay Jere, and Professor K.K. Agarwal for conducting all the 3 sessions in most professional way. With all these words, thank you. Thanks to all panelists, all those who are attending this program through YouTube or other social media forums. Our thanks from the ministry and from AICT to all of them for joining this program. Thank you very much. Thanks to all.
Thank you so much, sir. And with this, we conclude the session. Thank you so much.